Lord of Mysteries, The Arrival of the New Black Emperor by author Huo Yang. Chapter 51-75. Hobert said, "It turns out your wife had a child before marriage, and because she was afraid you would harm the child, your wife kept the truth hidden." Hobert roughly explained the child's background. Mr. Bach smiled bitterly. "I misunderstood Penny. It turns out I was the reason we didn't have children." He had actually had similar thoughts for a long time, but only today did he confirm that it was indeed his fault. Hobert said, "Mr. Bach, I've already discussed the divorce with your wife. Her intention is that as long as you don't harm her child, she can agree to file for divorce." In truth, Penny didn't really betray the marriage, as the child was born before they were married. However, it was her concealment that truly made this marriage begin to be unhappy. Bach smiled. "Hobert, I'm not some rude villager. How could I possibly take my anger out on a child?" He said, "The conditions I offered before remain unchanged. Let this matter end here." On the other side, Penny, sitting in the carriage, was extremely nervous. She was afraid Benny would be harmed, and she was afraid to see Mr. Bach's angry eyes. At this moment, she regretted it a little, thinking she shouldn't have trusted that young lawyer so easily. And Penny's father was even more nervous. He awkwardly held an axe, feeling that bringing an axe was indeed a foolish decision. But seeing his daughter's helpless eyes, the hand holding the axe handle regained its strength. It felt like they waited for a very, very long time before they saw Mr. Bach walking quickly from the farm road, holding Benny. At this moment, both father and daughter felt relieved. What was coming had finally arrived. They saw Hobert waving to them, and they got out of the car somewhat awkwardly. "Penny," Mr. Bach exclaimed, "you should have told me earlier." "I'm sorry, Bach," Penny said, lowering her head. I. "All right, let's part on good terms," Mr. Bach said. "While we don't yet hate each other, let's end it like this." Hobert played the villain. "The premise is that you must file for divorce, otherwise I will pursue your deception of Mr. Bach." Penny covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. I'm sorry, I kept it from you for so long." She actually regretted her long-standing concealment now. She thought she should have realized earlier. How could Mr. Bach get angry over a child? Or perhaps Mr. Bach simply wouldn't have married her, which also wouldn't have left her in constant fear for the past 3 years. Bach smiled. "I will give you the wool processing workshop so that you and your child have a stable source of income." The matter was finally over, and Mr. Bach found that his mood was not as depressed as it had been before. Bach's promise left Penny and her father somewhat at a loss. Bach waved his hand, said nothing more, and walked back to the farm step by step. Hobert said, "Madam, I don't know if you still remember Benny's biological father, but I advise you to forget about a man who denies responsibility after he's done. He took out the already prepared divorce agreement, now you believe it, right? No one will harm your child, and Mr. Bach has even thought about your future income source. Come, sign it. End this marriage with your own hands." Penny wiped her tears. "You are a trustworthy gentleman and a responsible lawyer." She held Benny and signed the divorce agreement. Penny's father also completely relaxed, believing this was the best possible outcome. After getting Penny's signature, Hobert drove the 3 of them back. Upon returning to the village, the old man asked Hobert to wait outside for a moment. About 2 or 3 minutes later, Hobert saw the old man come out with a handful of crumpled 1 sool and 2 sool banknotes. "Mr. Hobert, thank you so much today, Hobert smiled and interrupted, "Old man, if you really want to thank me, give me 2 pumpkins." Although he only served as a communicator, his communication was the most effective, safeguarding his client's rights and leaving a way out for Penny and her child. There were many pumpkins piled in the yard, and without waiting for the old man to reply, Hobert himself picked up 2 pumpkins and got into the car. "Goodbye, old man." The old man stood awkwardly at the courtyard gate, and after a long while, he helplessly said, "Goodbye." By then, the carriage had already driven far away. As soon as he returned to the law firm, Barton called Hobert to his office. "Mr. Bach's butler just came. He said He said Mr. Bach is very grateful to the diligent and responsible Mr. Hobert and has settled the £10 commission, so you will receive £1 as your reward. He smiled. How about it? Is there a bit of a letdown inside? Most of the cases lawyers encounter now are such trivial matters. Hobert smiled. The good news is, I don't have to pay taxes on this commission. Also, the commission was actually £10 plus 2 pumpkins. The pumpkins are a tip, so you can take one home later. Oh, we can have pumpkin pie tonight, Barton said with a smile. Hobert did not complain but chose to accept, and this composure once again pleased Barton. Sometimes he had to wonder, was this really a university student who hadn't even reached graduation age yet? The soul within Hobert was certainly not a workplace rookie. His previous job was much more stressful than this one. Sometimes he even had to voluntarily work overtime on Sundays. Towards the end of the afternoon, Hobert finally received a letter from the mercenary club. A buyer wanted to trade for the jewelry and gold he had tomorrow at noon. Hobert calculated the time and then wrote to Mr. Robin, arranging to discuss the case with them tomorrow afternoon. In the evening, Christine's family drank pumpkin porridge, listening to Hobert recount the story of the pumpkins. After listening to Hobert's account, his adoptive mother Monliza sighed with emotion. Hobert, your handling of this matter, while not maximizing your client's interests, did take care of the vulnerable mother and child. Christine also smiled. Things in life are often the most difficult to handle. Your kindness and wisdom were fully displayed in handling this matter. Hobert smiled. I just think this world should have more beauty. Christine raised her glass to this great ideal. South Continent, no existence town. Elder Calvin took the black cherry handed to him by Eliot, filled with emotion. The Bach family, located in the South Continent, had not added any new extraordinary characteristics for 8 or 9 years. Calvin looked at the extraordinary characteristic in his hand for a few seconds before saying to Eliot, your merits are enough to allow you to advance to the sequence 7 your father left behind. Uncle Calvin, what is the sequence 7 potion called? Briber. The black cherry that seemed to pulsate in Calvin's hand was the hope of the Bach family. With it, the Bach family would have one less madman in the future. The family possessed a sealed artifact capable of separating extraordinary characteristics, which was crucial for their continued existence. As long as an extraordinary characteristic was recovered, it would be re-separated and then given to future generations. Generally, extraordinary characteristics were given priority to direct relatives. For example, the extraordinary characteristic on Eliot came from his father who passed away when he was 7. Eliot's father was a sequence 7 when he passed away, so Eliot could only receive the potions from sequence 9 to sequence 7 for free. If he wanted to advance further, he would have to find a way himself. Alternatively, he could wait for an extraordinary characteristic with no descendants to inherit it, but Eliot didn't hold much hope for this, as such an opportunity was too slim. Eliot had already completed his acting as a barbarian and digested the potion. With Calvin's help, he immediately consumed the Briber potion. Hobert's previous order on Eliot still had a good effect, and Eliot did not experience too severe adverse reactions after consuming the potion. Eliot praised the Creator inwardly. From then on, for the next 6 months, he no longer had to worry about mad whispers and losing control. After asking Calvin about how others acted as a briber, Eliot took his leave. Watching Eliot's departing figure, Calvin was somewhat lost in thought. He felt that Eliot had been too fortunate recently. While Calvin was lost in thought, it was Harvey Hayden's turn, who had returned from the mission with Eliot, to give his routine report on the mission's process. However, after seeing Eliot walk away, he immediately reported, Elder Calvin, I have something important to report. Eliot's behavior was somewhat abnormal the night he obtained the barbarian extraordinary characteristic. Calvin immediately took it seriously. Tell me in detail. On Saturday morning, Hobert brought the jewelry and gold recovered from Heyman's hiding place to the club for a transaction. After inspecting the goods, the other party offered £1,300. The other party then argued forcefully, trying to persuade Hobert to accept the £1,300 offer, but he had chosen the wrong opponent. After a friendly negotiation, the deal was finally closed at £1,380. The £1,500 price Hobert quoted indeed had an inflated component. The ideal price was between £1,350 and £1,400. If the other party hadn't argued with Hobert like a belligerent rooster, causing Hobert to no longer be able to suppress the urge to dispute with him, perhaps the deal would have been closed at £1,350. In addition to this batch of jewelry and gold, over £600 in cash were also found at the time, with Hobert and Hugh each receiving £316. Including the recently concluded transaction, Hobert now had a total of £1,696 of ill-gotten gains in his hand. Hobert originally intended to keep the extra £96 as his commission and give the remaining money entirely to Mr. Robin and his cousin. However, his experience from his previous life told him that this was inappropriate, as it would devalue his labor and effort. While it might earn him Mr. Robin's temporary gratitude, it would not earn him others' respect. So, Hobert first put the £96 in cash into his wallet, then divided the £1,600 in cash into 2 equal parts. When he was in front of Mr. Robin, he would then count out his commission, which would also serve as a lesson for Mr. Robin. That afternoon, Mr. Robin and his cousin arrived as scheduled. Hobert received them in a small reception room. After some investigation, and certainly using some special methods, I finally found Mr. Zachary and Mr. Heyman. Mr. Robin and his cousin had originally given up hope. Hearing such significant news at the beginning of the conversation, they both stood up excitedly. After a friendly negotiation with them, I recovered the money you were swindled out of. Hobert placed the small briefcase on the table, but you must understand that this money was recovered through special means, so please, both of you, do not spread the word. Mr. Robin stared at the box in Hobert's hand, nodding repeatedly. Finally, Hobert opened the box, and they saw 2 stacks of banknotes made up of £5 and £10. Then came the excited sound of counting money. They counted several times, from initial disbelief to excitement, and then to tears of joy. After a long while, Mr. Robin finally composed himself. "Lawyer, your professional abilities exceed our imagination." Hobert smiled. "Thank you for your compliments. Now it's time to fulfill your promise." Although Mr. Robin was a bit reluctant, he still counted out £160 and handed it to Hobert. Although his cousin grumbled, "Don't most lawyers only charge 15%? He also reluctantly counted out £160. Hobert took the money. "I hope you will remember this lesson. This city is more like a dark forest, full of traps set by hunters. Don't always think about becoming rich overnight. Having such thoughts is the easiest way to step into a trap." He then returned £80 to Mr. Robin and his cousin. "This time I'm only charging a 10% commission. If there's a next time, I will charge a full 20% commission. Don't complain about the commission being too high then, because you'll have brought it upon yourselves." Mr. Robin and his cousin were overjoyed, even feeling for a moment that they had earned £80. Hobert sighed that Ruin's culture was not, broad and profound, enough. This was a common trick in the ad era, and almost no one fell for it anymore, yet it unexpectedly worked well in Ruin. In any case, Mr. Robin's case had finally come to a satisfactory conclusion. To prevent any accidents, Hobert asked the law firm's coachman to drive Mr. Robin and his cousin to the bank. Since this was not within the coachman's job scope, Hobert generously gave him 5 sous as an outreach allowance. Then he went to his rented room and put all his cash together. The commission for Mr. Robin's case was £160, the extra ill-gotten gains were £96, plus his original £47, 13 sous, and 8 pence. Now his cash amounted to £303, 13 sous, and 8 pence. There was also the secret supplicant's extraordinary characteristic and the proceeds from the mutated eyeball. Hobert estimated he would receive about 180 more, bringing his savings close to £500. Most middle-class families didn't have that much savings. Suddenly having so much money, it would be a lie to say he wasn't happy. He ordered several characteristic Dixie roasts from a restaurant and bought a fruit cake and some desserts from a pastry shop. Upon returning home, Hobert told his family that he had received a commission today, so he was sharing the delicious food with everyone. Donna exclaimed, "Ever since Hobert started working, dinner has become much more interesting." Tyrone, eating his dessert in big bites, also said, "And Hobert seems to have cheered up a lot." Hobert smiled. "That's because I found my own value, so of course I'll become different from before." This was his way of explaining why he was becoming less and less like Hobert. When he first transmigrated, he had to carefully act as Hobert every day. On Sunday, Hobert finally got to sleep in. He left home after 10 in the morning, preparing to sell the secret supplicant's extraordinary characteristic. Hobert first went to 192 Blanca Street and used the bestowed ritual to retrieve the secret supplicant extraordinary characteristic from the country of disorder. Then, he took the extraordinary characteristic to the mercenary club. Just like last week, he first practiced shooting for a while and then ate lunch at the club's restaurant. Some people in the restaurant were discussing the surprise attack that occurred in the South Continent, but everyone seemed to only know that it was a victory, and the specific results of the battle were still unclear. At 1 p.m., Hobert went to attend the Beander gathering at the Underground Theater as planned. Hobert did not sit in the corner as he did last time. He sat in a front row center seat. After the golden masked elder arrived, he did not rush to trade but waited for those seeking teammates to speak first. This time, Hobert was much closer to the golden masked elder, and he felt that the elder's oppressive aura was more like the feeling given by a Beander of the arbitrator pathway. It was very likely that this elder was a member of the Rune royal family or a great noble, because the Rune royal family's control over their own extraordinary characteristics was very strict, making it impossible for a wild, high-sequence arbitrator to appear. If one did appear, it would be equivalent to delivering fat meat to their mouths. It was believed that this elder must be being hunted down and would have no leisure to host a gathering here. After the gathering began, to Hobert's surprise, the person who sought teammates to excavate a ruin last week appeared again. "We have encountered new circumstances. This ruin is more difficult to excavate than we imagined. We have lost 2 teammates, but we still haven't found a clue. So, we are inviting higher sequence Beyonders to join the excavation. As for how to distribute the items in the ruin, we can discuss that in person. Also, does anyone know Rex Heller?" Hobert was stunned. How did the original owner's biological father get brought into this? At this point, a middle-aged retired officer said, "Commander Rex was a legendary figure in the South Continent Army, more than 20 years ago, but he has been dead for 21 years. Why are you suddenly asking about this?" The person seeking high-sequence Beander teammates was a bit surprised. "We saw Rex's message in the ruin. We thought he was a 4th epic figure." The middle-aged retired officer then said, "I suggest you seek cooperation with Brigadier General Christine. Brigadier General Christine and Commander Rex were the best of friends. I think he will be interested in that ruin. And the Brigadier General's eldest son also attended this gathering, which is this gentleman." The officer pointed to Hobert, and many people looked over at Hobert. Hobert politely stood up and said to the officer, "Excuse me, I don't know you." "How do you know I am my father's eldest son?" "That's because there's a family photo on the Brigadier General's desk," the other party said. "I saw your photo in it." The person seeking teammates immediately asked Hobert, "Sir, do you want to participate in the excavation of the ruin? I guarantee your safety." Hobert, of course, understood the other party's meaning. He replied directly, "Sorry, I cannot make a decision for my father, but I can convey your team-up request to him. This is my address." The other party quickly took out a pen and paper, wrote down the address, and came over to hand it to Hobert. "If the general is interested in cooperating, please inform me, and I will visit immediately." Hobert glanced at the address. Below it was the other party's name, Jacob Otto. He put away the note and said, "No problem." The gathering continued. After most people had stated their trade requests, Hobert stood up and said loudly, I have a substance here obtained next to a Beander's corpse. After my friend's appraisal, it came from a secret supplicant. Does anyone need it? He deliberately did not say the term, extraordinary characteristic, and he pretended not to know the law of indestructibility of extraordinary characteristics. According to the rules of the gathering, Hobert repeated what he had just said in a loud voice, and then he stood there waiting. If no one came to trade with him after half a minute, then this trade would fail, and Hobert would have to sit down immediately. Others would then stand up and initiate new trades. Hobert only waited a few seconds before a military officer in his 30s stood up and said, Name your price. £320, Hobert immediately said. The other party shook his head. Friend, or rather, Brigadier General Christine's eldest son, the item you have is called an extraordinary characteristic. Generally, a sequence 9 extraordinary characteristic is indeed worth this price, and some popular extraordinary characteristics can even sell for over £400. However, I don't think anyone here is willing to become a secret supplicant. I'm buying it back with the intention of having someone craft it into an extraordinary item, because this extraordinary characteristic will give the holder extremely high spirituality, which will greatly increase the success rate of ritual magic. £280, that's a fair price. Hobert counter-offered, how about £290? You won't lose money at this price, and we can be friends. All right then, the other party said. The other party immediately counted out £290 in cash. Hobert handed him the extraordinary characteristic, and after confirming it was correct, the trade was completed. With so much cash in his arms, Hobert was ready to open a bank account and deposit the money. After the gathering, Hobert wrote a letter to Miss Hugh in the lobby's sofa area, inviting her to the law firm tomorrow noon to divide the spoils. After returning home, Hobert took £10 from the £290 as a commission for selling the extraordinary characteristic and separately wrapped the £280. After dinner, Hobert told Christine about the team-up request from the gathering today. Christine simply said, "Got it," and there was no further discussion. A new week began. Miss Hugh arrived at the law firm where Hobert worked at the agreed time, but Furs was still a bit worried, so she came along with Miss Hugh. Hobert found a reception room and first took out £80 in cash. This is the proceeds from the mutated eyeball. He then took out the £280. This is the proceeds from selling the extraordinary characteristic. I bore a certain risk in both transactions, so I have already taken out £5 and £10 respectively as payment for selling the goods. I trust Miss Hugh won't object, right? Miss Hugh looked at the 2 stacks of cash and, much to her own disappointment, showed a joyful expression. No, then I can get £180. Hobert divided the 2 stacks of cash equally. I hope we have opportunities to cooperate again in the future. Miss Hugh said, we will. The sheriff potion formula was one step closer. Furs, standing nearby, thought to herself, he actually divided the proceeds equally with Miss Hugh this time. It seems he is a reliable friend after all. In the process of tracking Zachary and Heyman, Miss Hugh's contributions were indeed less than Hobert's. After Miss Hugh put away the money, she glanced at her good friend, then hesitated a little and said, Hobert, if I want to ask you some questions about mysticism, what is your fee standard? Hobert was stunned, then smiled and said, we are members of the Justice League, and we should help each other. I need to collect some intelligence in the countryside recently. If I have a reliable companion by my side, that would be even better. If you want to gain some knowledge of mysticism, as long as it's within my scope of knowledge, I will answer you in detail. The reward is for Miss Hugh to come with me to collect intelligence. Miss Hugh immediately said, no problem. We'll go back and discuss the questions we want to ask you. After seeing off Zio and Furs, Hobert stayed in his office reading documents, preparing to deal with Mr. Barton's second commission tomorrow. The client was also in the suburbs, but this time it was in the western suburbs. After lunch, Hobert went out again to visit clients. He went to his rented apartment and studied the psychic necklace in the country of disorder. Around 2:50 p.m., he was ready to attend the tarot club. As soon as 3 o'clock arrived, boundless gray fog enveloped his vision, and in the blink of an eye, he appeared in the majestic grand hall. Justice, Audrey, as usual, greeted everyone warmly, then she first handed the 3 pages of diary she bought at Mr. A's gathering to the fool, Klein, to repay her previous debt. After Klein finished reading those 3 pages of diary, Hobert said, "Mr. Fool, I have also collected 2 pages of Emperor Rosel's diary. I hope this can repay your previous reminder about my family's curse, Mr. Fool." When he attended the first gathering, Kay's reminder provided Hobert with a very important clue, and it quickly proved that Kay's reminder was correct. At this moment, Klein was very pleased. As the number of members increased, he could obtain more diaries. These were all valuable knowledge and wealth. And the emperor was very sensible, knowing to thank him for his previous reminder. He said in a solemn voice, "Then express it." Hobert picked up the pen that suddenly appeared in front of him and expressed 2 pages of Emperor Rosel's diary. The basic content of these 2 pages was from diaries he had seen when collecting notes before, but he imitated Emperor Rosel's style and added a self-fabricated diary entry. June 12, I discovered a great secret, and this secret is known only to me. I found an effective method to cure losing control. This sounds very unmystical, but anything is possible, and that is the essence of mysticism. The method is to chant the honorific name of the Creator. It will use its surging order power to restore a person in the early stages of losing control to normal. I have inquired indirectly, and no one knows who the Creator is. It is a truly hidden existence. Also, I have already experimented with a guinea pig, and there are no negative effects. The Creator seems very willing to help those who are about to lose control escape their predicament. Is this also a form of acting? Its honorific name is, "Oh, Creator of human order. You are the master of the kingdom of disorder. You are the master of the clock of order. Ha ha ha, from now on, I no longer have to worry about the risk of losing control." The reason Hobert did this was to tell Kay his honorific name through Rosel's diary, and with the Emperor's endorsement, it appeared more credible. Later, Hobert would also remind Kay that old Neil was in the early stages of losing control. Once Kay confirmed old Neil's situation and chanted the honorific name of the Creator, Hobert would be happy to help. As for 008, first, it can only write stories that occur in one city. Now that it is in Tingen City, it cannot affect Hobert in Backland. Even if Kay chanted the honorific name of the Creator and was noticed by 008, it would at most trace it back to the country of disorder and would not be able to find Hobert hiding behind the country of disorder. That is source material. What sealed artifact status could be higher than source material? To make the diary appear more realistic, Hobert also carefully placed this diary entry among those clearly written by Rosel in his early years, which further increased the credibility of the Creator. Since Rosel chanted the honorific name of the Creator in his early years, he lived well and was not affected by it, which indicates that the Creator is trustworthy, at least not an evil god. As for who Rosel experimented on, that was something that happened in the Intis Republic over 100 years ago. With Kay's current channels, it is impossible to investigate clearly. Even if the investigation result is no such incident found, it doesn't matter, as the diary repeatedly emphasized secrecy. Additionally, Hobert was also taking advantage of Kay's relatively limited mystical knowledge at this time, not knowing about the existence of outer gods, which further increased the possibility of Kay chanting the honorific name of the Creator. Hobert estimated that with Kay's caution, he would not chant the honorific name of the Creator, unless absolutely necessary, but with Hobert's current abilities, he could only do this much. At least he felt he had done right by old Neil. Klein pondered for 2 or 3 seconds when he saw this diary entry. He did not expect there to be such a powerful existence that enjoyed helping Beyonders cure losing control. Was the other party acting? Although Rosel had experimented, it was still best not to try. After all, no one could guarantee that the Creator would always be so helpful. However, he still kept the honorific name in mind. If a teammate showed signs of losing control, no clear symptoms of losing control, and there was truly no other way, it might be worth a try. After reading the diary, he said, "You may begin." Hobert asked Alger, "Mr. Hanged Man, is there any news about my remuneration?" "You have 3 choices." Alger finally had a chance to show off his connections. He smiled and said, "The first choice is a somewhat gaudy pocket watch. After wearing it, you will have a very good sense of balance, and your movements will become very agile. You can make paper as sharp as a knife. And there is a chance to foresee dangers that will be encountered within 1 or 2 seconds through spirituality. The negative effect is that as long as you wear it for more than 2 hours cumulatively, you will occasionally uncontrollably burst into exaggerated laughter. The laughter will only stop after 5 or more people see you laugh. If you cannot gather 5 audience members, you will keep laughing until you laugh yourself to death." Hobert tried not to look at Mr. Fool. At this time, the mysterious Mr. Fool probably didn't know that these were clearly the abilities of a clown. Then he frowned. This negative effect was a bit of a trap, almost comparable to the negative effects of a sealed artifact. If he went into a jungle, desert, or out to sea alone, he would just laugh himself to death. Even in Backland, such a negative effect was very troublesome. Would he have to wake Christine and the others in the middle of the night to watch him laugh? That would be very annoying. In fact, before the gathering, Hobert had already decided what type of extraordinary item he wanted. His previous actions in tracking Heyman and Zachary exposed his shortcomings of insufficient combat power and poor agility. So he needed an extraordinary item that could enhance his combat power. The ability of the pocket watch mentioned by Hanged Man was good, but the negative effect made Hobert hesitate. Alger probably saw that Hobert was not interested in this pocket watch, so he continued, "The second choice is a white cane. As long as you use it, you can possess strength and speed beyond your own, and you can also accumulate power with each attack, unleashing a blow 3 times stronger than your own after reaching a certain accumulation. In addition, it can make people who cannot swim become proficient in swimming and diving." Alger continued, "The negative effect of the white cane is, it makes one extremely prone to anger, and one will make irrational choices when driven by anger. However, as long as one tries to restrain themselves, the negative effect can basically be avoided." Hobert guessed that the extraordinary characteristic of this cane should come from the sequence 8 raging people of the Sailor Path. The cane's ability was indeed what Hobert wanted, but the negative effect still left him unsatisfied. One must know that, in many cases, an irrational choice can very likely be fatal. Seeing that the Emperor was still not satisfied, Alger spoke for the 3rd time. "The 3rd choice is a silver ring. After wearing it, you will become an expert in fighting. The negative effect is that the wearer will become overly cautious, even appearing somewhat paranoid. This negative effect can be avoided by ignoring the cautious thoughts triggered by the ring, but it requires some time to distinguish between true caution and caution induced by the ring." Hobert massaged his forehead. For him, the negative effects of these 3 extraordinary items were a bit too significant, which also indicated that the wild artisan collaborating with Hanged Man was of a very average skill level. Hobert had this thought after seeing the negative effect of the psychic necklace. For other Beyonders, these negative effects were acceptable. After all, gaining a new ability always came with a price. After much consideration, Hobert said, "I choose the ring. Caution is always better than anger." Alger nodded, "Good, how should I send it to you?" At this time, Kay had not yet started the Fool's Express, but Hobert had already thought of a solution. "You can send it to 388 Queens Avenue, Backland. The recipient is private." This address was the Mercenary Club's address. He would entrust a waiter to receive the package, and then he would pick it up. Through yesterday's gathering, Hobert guessed that the Mercenary Club likely had the involvement and support of the Rune royal family. Even if others from the Tarot Club found this address, it would be difficult to investigate his identity due to the club's special nature. Furthermore, Even if some investigation could be done within the club, they would assume the Emperor was a military person, as the core members of the club were mercenary teams composed of retired military officers. Audrey sat up straight. She was very familiar with Queen's Avenue. The entire avenue was filled with properties belonging to the nobles of the ruined kingdom. Could the Emperor be a noble's son? I wonder if I've met him at some banquet. But why do I have no impression of the owner of number 388? Upon hearing such a specific address, Alger also prepared to ask a friend in Backland to help investigate the Emperor's identity, but he felt that the Emperor would not expose himself so easily. No problem, Alger said. Fortunately, I heard that a military airship going to Backland is resupplying on the island where I am today. If all goes well, it should reach your hands in 2 to 3 days. The transaction segment ended, and the information exchange segment began. Hobert spoke first. I just met a merchant who sells extraordinary materials. If anyone needs extraordinary materials, I can act as an intermediary and only charge a basic commission fee. Additionally, while trading with the extraordinary material merchant, I learned that there is an elderly official Beander in Tingen City who has been purchasing materials related to life alchemy. That merchant said he seemed to be a seer, preparing for some evil ritual, and his state seemed a bit off. If anyone is in Tingen City, be careful. If anyone has relevant channels, you can also remind the local official Beander. When Hobert said this, he tried his best not to pay attention to the fool's reaction. Because of the obstruction of the fog, no one could see the fool's current state, but Hobert knew that Kay must be listening intently at this moment. Finally, Hobert sighed. Loss of control is the norm for Beyonders, and official Beyonders are no exception. Alger looked at the Emperor and said, "This is also what I don't understand. Logically speaking, the high-ranking members of the church cannot all be fools. Besides, they have thousands of years of accumulated experience. The 7 Orthodox churches should all know the acting method, so why don't they make it public within the church? This would effectively prevent their own people from losing control." Hobert smiled. "Mr. Hanged Man, you don't need to probe me like this. Yes, just as you guessed, the law of the indestructibility of extraordinary characteristics." Alger immediately looked at the fool, seemingly seeking confirmation. But the great Mr. Fool could only smile bitterly at this moment. "This is also a question that confuses me. However, what you call the law of the indestructibility of extraordinary characteristics has given me inspiration for the answer." Seeing that the fool did not correct the Emperor's statement, Alger smiled. "Mr. Emperor, I wasn't probing you. I just wasn't sure about my own conjecture." Audrey felt that ever since Mr. Emperor joined, the information exchange segment of the Tarot Club had become much more high-end. However, this exposed her ignorance of mysticism. She really wanted to join the conversation. "Mr. Emperor, what is the law of the indestructibility of extraordinary characteristics?" Hobert smiled. "Miss Justice, you seem to still owe me some remuneration from the last gathering." "That's right," Audrey said, "the remuneration from last time, plus this explanation. How about £600? Hobert almost choked on his own saliva. "Girl, do you have money with nowhere to spend it? £600 just like that? Did you forget? At Mr. A's gathering, I haggled with the giant bishop's subordinate until my mouth was dry for only £150. He then thought about how he and Zio fought desperately, finally bringing his wealth to around £500, and then just because of Miss Justice's curiosity, his assets doubled. However, Hobert then thought that the law of the indestructibility of extraordinary characteristics was common sense to him, but for a noble lady like Audrey, who had no access to official Beyonders or high-end Beyander circles, this law was indeed very valuable. Overcoming one's past self was still a clever use of extraordinary abilities, but the law of the indestructibility of extraordinary characteristics was high-end extraordinary knowledge. Seeing the Emperor in a daze, Audrey quickly said, "If you think the price is too low, we can discuss it further." "This price is just right." Hobert began to explain. "This knowledge has always been monopolized by the church and mysterious organizations, but it is a very important law in the extraordinary world, yet when explained, it is very simple. Extraordinary characteristics will not be destroyed, nor will they decrease, they will only transfer from one carrier to another. For example, the ring Mr. Hanged Man sent me, the reason it has extraordinary abilities is because it carries the extraordinary characteristic of a fighter, or fighting scholar. After I wear it, I can use the corresponding partial extraordinary abilities. Audrey seemed to suddenly understand some issues. Then a Beander is also a carrier. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Hobert smiled and said, Miss Justice is very smart. If you defeat a Beander opponent one day, don't rush to leave if there's no danger, because the extraordinary characteristic extracted from their body will be your spoils of war. So, an extraordinary characteristic can also be the main ingredient for a potion. At this point, Audrey suddenly covered her mouth, and it took her a while to compose herself. Hobert then continued, it is precisely because of the existence of the law of immortality of extraordinary characteristics that easily obtainable extraordinary materials are already extraordinary characteristics and reside within the higher echelons of the Church. If the acting method were made public and potions were digested too quickly, there would certainly be fierce competition within the Church, especially between superiors and subordinates, who might become like enemies. Of course, this also involves knowledge of two other laws. Miss Justice, although that knowledge is also very important in the extraordinary world, you don't need it for now. When you do, we can make another transaction. Audrey let out an, oh, she felt that the law of immortality of extraordinary characteristics sounded very advanced, at least much more advanced than the information Mr. Hanged Man had given her before. She had so easily paid him £1,000 then. In comparison, Mr. the Creator was simply too generous. However, what she didn't know was that the £1,000 the Hanged Man would use to purchase the silver pendant for his transaction with the Creator, ultimately flowing into the Creator's pocket. Alger was slightly stunned after hearing the Creator's words before saying, you mean there are 3 laws of extraordinary characteristics? Audrey secretly rejoiced in her heart. So, you only know 1/3 of such important knowledge. That's right. Hobert smiled and asked, Mr. Hanged Man, do you want to initiate a new transaction? Klein almost covered his face. How much extraordinary knowledge does the Creator know? How can he have new knowledge to sell at every gathering? Alger hesitated for a few seconds before saying somewhat dejectedly, never mind, let's talk about it later. He didn't have that much money now to pay the Creator as compensation. Audrey asked, Mr. the Creator, how should I give you the money? Hobert thought for a moment. Send it to Queen's Avenue, number 388, as well. Right, private, on the outside of the package. Okay. Hobert continued to share free information. There are many members of the Aurora Order in Backland. If any of you present are in Backland, please be cautious about joining Beander gatherings, as there might be madmen from the Aurora Order there. Klein, behind the gray fog above, showed a focused expression. He had just killed a member of the Aurora Order, so as soon as he heard about the Aurora Order, he immediately listened intently. Audrey also took it seriously. After all, she was in Backland, and just a few days ago, she had attended a Beander gathering. But Hobert didn't continue, because mentioning either Heyman or Hillman could expose himself, given that Audrey knew Hillman. After the exchange session ended, the gathering officially concluded. Back in reality, Hobert stared at the ceiling for a while before getting out of bed. He took a hansom cab to the Mercenary Club, first instructing the waiter to receive the package for private, then retrieved bullets to practice shooting at the firing range. Audrey took a carriage to Queen's Avenue. She asked the coachman to slow down when passing No. 388. Inside the carriage, Audrey carefully observed the situation at number 388. The lawn was well maintained, indicating that the owner of the mansion was financially well off. Wait, why are there so many people in military uniforms coming and going? Oh, No wonder Mr. the Creator knew that Ruin wouldn't retaliate against the Forsake Empire. It turns out he was born into a military family. As long as she knew the general background, it would be easy to handle. Audrey instructed, to Viscount Lyerson's house. Viscount Lyerson's family had always served the military and had a good relationship with the Hall family. Audrey had a good relationship with Viscount Lyerson's youngest son, Kong Si, and could ask him about the situation at number 388. Kong Si happened to be home. He warmly received Audrey, but upon learning of her purpose, he smiled helplessly. Audrey, the place you're talking about is the Mercenary Club. You'd best not delve too deeply into it, it could bring you some trouble. Audrey asked again, what professions do the main participants of this club engage in? Retired military officers, scions with military backgrounds, noble scions with military experience, and of course, some merchants are also admitted for convenience in handling spoils of war. Audrey recalled the Creator's attire and quickly ruled out retired military officers and merchants. He should be a scion with a military background or a noble scion with military experience. A strong, cheerful, and sunny image formed in Audrey's mind. To my knowledge, Kong Si seemed to hesitate before saying, there are also many royal family members in the club. The military will use the club to issue some tasks not suitable for official intervention, as well as some secret missions, so you should not inquire everywhere about information regarding the club. I won't ask around randomly, Audrey said, so, this club is very high-end. Yes, it's a top-tier club in the country. Audrey, Mr. the Creator is more formidable than I imagined. She no longer had the idea of continuing to inquire. As Kong Si said, it was very likely to cause some trouble. Kong Si, I have a package to send to the Mercenary Club. Please find a servant to deliver it for me. Audrey thought her approach was very clever. Even if Mr. the Creator tracked the servant delivering the package, he could only trace it back to Viscount Lyerson. And Viscount Lyerson only had 2 sons and no daughters. At that time, Mr. the Creator would surely be very surprised. Above the gray fog, after the gathering ended, Klein did not leave immediately. He pulled out the citrine pendant on his wrist and silently chanted in his mind, Old Neil's condition is problematic. Old Neil's condition is problematic. After chanting 7 times, the pendant rotated clockwise, though the amplitude of the rotation was not large. There really is a problem. However, the problem didn't seem to be very serious yet. At this moment, he suddenly recalled that when he first opened his spirit vision after consuming the potion, he had seen a strange eye behind Old Neil. After a brief thought, Klein had a plan. Tell the experienced captain about this. The captain would always have a solution. Klein then silently chanted in his mind, the Creator is evil. The Creator is evil. After 7 chants, the crystal pendant remained motionless. Insufficient conditions for divination, or, the Creator, is at a very high level, making effective divination impossible even above the gray fog. Klein felt that both reasons were plausible, so he tried to substitute his divination phrase. It is dangerous for me to chant the Creator's honorific name in the real world. It is dangerous for me to chant the Creator's honorific name in the real world. After chanting 7 times, the pendant began to rotate counterclockwise, indicating no danger. Klein smiled to himself and murmured, as Rosal said, this is an astonishing secret. If a colleague around me shows signs of losing control in the future and there's no solution, I can try chanting the Creator's honorific name. Then Klein left the gray fog and immediately took a carriage to Zoutland Street, number 36. He chatted with Roxanne as usual and learned that Old Neil was on duty at the armory at that time. Arriving at the captain's office, Dunn Smith, with his prominent nose, gray eyes, and slightly receding hairline, asked, what is it again? Klein twitched the corner of his mouth, Captain. Why add, again? He carefully closed the door before saying, Captain, Old Neil's condition isn't right. Klein lied, claiming he had recently noticed Old Neil's dazed state. This afternoon, he suddenly recalled the anomaly from his first spirit vision activation, so he performed a divination and confirmed that old Neil's condition was indeed problematic, though it didn't seem too serious yet. Dunn remained silent for a second or two before saying, "Old Neil is on duty in the armory. I'll pull him into a dream shortly to examine his condition. If it's not urgent yet, we'll immediately send a telegram to request an expert from the Holy Cathedral to help resolve it. If the situation is already very urgent, I will control old Neil, and you will perform the ritualistic magic to pray to the goddess for power to solve the problem." Klein was a little nervous. "Captain, I haven't performed such complex ritualistic magic. It's just like the rituals for spiritual communication and praying for power. You only need to change the corresponding incantations a bit," Dunn smiled. "Now you are a member of the Night Watcher squad, and your teammate needs your strength to get out of trouble." Klein gave a wry smile. "Captain, saying that puts even more pressure on me." However, the captain's gentle smile gave Klein immense encouragement. "I will do my best to complete the ritual." Dunn nodded. "Go prepare." As Klein, feeling a bit uneasy, reached the door, he heard the captain say, "Oh, right, I forgot something. Performing this ritual requires burning materials rich in spirituality. Ordinary deep sleep flowers and night-scented grass don't have enough spirituality. Go write an application form and collect summer leaf grass and sleepless flower powder from behind the Chinese gate." "Okay." Klein immediately felt less nervous. Dunn then said, "Wait a moment, there's one more thing. Call Leonard from the lounge and have him join this operation." Klein nodded. "Captain, I'll also have Roxanne and Mrs. Oriana leave work early, have Frey close the lounge early, and wait in the hall to avoid no one answering if the police come knocking." "Right, Captain." Dunn visibly froze for a second or two before saying, That's right, that's exactly what I was going to say." Leaving the office, Klein first had the clerical staff leave, then notified Leonard and Frey, and only then did he write the application form. After getting Dunn's signature, he asked Luo Yao, who was on duty at the Chinese gate today, to get the materials. Having done all that, Klein, a bit nervous, held the spiritual materials in his hand and waited in the underground passage. After waiting 7 or 8 minutes, the captain and Leonard came down together. The three of them silently entered the armory. Dunn gave a look to his two teammates and pulled open the armory door. Inside, old Neil was resting his chin in his hands, seemingly dozing. Hearing someone open the door, he suddenly woke up. "Is there an operation today? You're all here to get weapons." As he spoke, old Neil yawned, and his eyelids grew heavy. He immediately realized something was wrong. "Dunn, you. Before he could finish his sentence, old Neil leaned back in his chair and fell asleep. Looking at Dunn, he was already leaning against the door, eyes tightly closed, head bowed. Leonard calmly said to Klein, "I think you'd best start setting up the ritual, just in case." "Okay." Klein finally understood why the captain had called Leonard. It was to prevent him from missing the optimal time for the ritual due to his inexperience. The captain was as reliable as ever. With Leonard's help, Klein moved a table in front of old Neil and began drawing symbols and lighting candles. The symbols he drew, of course, were the symbols of the Black Knight goddess. Although, the creator, had Rosal's endorsement, Klein would not pray to an unknown entity unless absolutely necessary. Klein began lighting the candles. Just as he was lighting the second one, the captain suddenly spoke, "Quickly prepare the ritual, old Neil's condition is already very serious." Klein was slightly startled. The scene before him shattered like a broken mirror. He was lighting the first candle, and the second candle had not yet been started. He immediately understood that he had just been pulled into a dream by the captain. Klein hurried to light the remaining candles. He hadn't expected old Neil's loss of control to be so severe. Just then, the sleeping old Neil suddenly raised his head. His eyes were still tightly closed, but on his forehead, a cold, emotionless, indifferent eye slowly opened. This eye sent a shiver down Klein's spine. He quickly averted his gaze, not daring to meet it. Although under Dunn's control, old Neil still stiffly rose like a sleepwalker. His target was the simple altar on the table. Clearly, the out-of-control part of Old Neil had sensed danger and wanted to destroy the altar. Leonard chanted, "In the past, if I remember correctly, my life was a feast, where all hearts were open, and all good wine overflowed." Klein immediately felt weak all over, with no desire to continue his next action. He shook his head to dispel the inner tranquility and laziness, and quickly burned the powder of summer leaf grass and sleepless flower. With Leonard's assistance, Dunn regained the initiative, and Old Neil gradually sat back down in his chair, the eye on his forehead slowly closing. But immediately after, another emotionless eye appeared on Old Neil's cheek, slowly opening. Taking advantage of this eye not yet being fully open, Klein quickly and solemnly chanted the incantation in Hermes. "I pray for the power of the night. I pray for the power of crimson. I pray for the favor of the Black Night Goddess. I pray that you eliminate the out-of-control factors of the Night Watcher's member within the altar, and make his extraordinary power stable again." The eye on Old Neil's cheek finally opened. It looked indifferently at everything before it, as if everything the three Night Watchers members were doing had nothing to do with it. After the incantation was complete, Klein, within the spiritual wall, felt a vast, terrifying, and hidden power descend. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A strangely intense wind suddenly arose around the altar, but strangely, an unprecedented sense of tranquility filled the entire armory. The eye on Old Neil's face, which had been devoid of any emotion, suddenly showed fear. It was forced out of Old Neil's body by a vast, invisible power. Before it could hide in the dark corner, the surging power struck again, trapping and crushing it. Klein and Leonard both seemed to hear a sharp shriek filled with unwillingness. The fierce wind subsided, and peace returned to the armory. Cough cough cough. Old Neil woke up. "Are you trying to break my old bones?" Klein used spirit vision to look at Old Neil again. Old Neil looked very weak, but the eye that had been hiding behind him was gone. He let out a long breath, praised the goddess, and silently thanked Mr. Emperor in his heart. Having done all that, Klein looked at the captain. He remembered there was something important he needed to remind the captain, but at this moment, his head throbbed. The ritual just now had consumed too much of his spirituality, and he needed rest now. In the suburbs of Tingen, in a house with a dark red chimney and a green lawn. A pale hand, holding a quill pen, was writing in an ordinary notebook. Klein actually detected the precursor to Old Neil losing control. The story has been rewritten again. The quill pen scribbled, Dunn Smith was subtly contaminated by the Antigonus family's notes. Later, after entering Hannah's Vincent's dream and seeing a clear image of the true creator, the contamination Dunn Smith received gradually spread. Black Night. The pale hand quickly lifted the pen. The quill pen almost wrote, Black Night Goddess. After all, the quill pen was only a sealed artifact. If the Black Night Goddess were also written into the story, she would definitely be detected by the goddess, and Ince Zangwill, who held the pen, would surely die tragically in Tingen City. The pale hand used the quill pen to cross out the word, Black Night, and then continued to write. Klein's ritual was very successful, but due to the depletion of his spirituality, he didn't have time to tell Dunn Smith about the ritual Old Neil was performing. For a period afterward, Klein always forgot to inform his colleagues due to various matters. In his opinion, this wasn't a very important matter. By the time he had a chance to explain, it was already too late. The ritual Old Neil was performing would cause his condition to show signs of losing control again. Perhaps in 3 or 4 weeks, he would return to the brink of losing control. Old Neil's loss of control was inevitable, as his ritual had attracted certain gazes. As long as his ritual continued, he would be recontaminated and would again risk losing control. His loss of control would impact Dunn Smith's psyche and simultaneously worsen the subtle contamination Dunn had previously received, thereby leading him to do things that met Ince Zangwill's expectations. What was puzzling was why Klein would realize Old Neil was on the brink of losing control. His fate underwent a strange change here. Could it be because he obtained? The pale hand quickly lifted the pen again. He had a premonition that if he let the quill pen continue to write, things would become uncontrollable. He quickly closed the diary. This story, full of surprises, temporarily came to an end. Inside, looking at the lawn outside with his single eye. Why did the stories in Tingen City always suffer from some uncontrollable interference? Especially this Klein, why did he always mess up the stories he had carefully written? On Tuesday morning, Hobert gathered the relevant documents and took the law firm's carriage to the western suburbs to visit his client, Mr. Polly. Mr. Polly was an old man in his 50s, with sparse hair, many wrinkles, and a stern expression as he smoked his pipe. I want to sue the Airlie family until they are bankrupt. I swear, I want to make them pay. Mr. Polly said, holding his pipe. Last night, yes, just last night, the giant dog he kept in the basement got out again and made a mess of my flower bed. But that old scoundrel Airlie still insists he doesn't own a dog, let alone a giant one. After listening to Mr. Polly complain for a long time, Hobert generally understood. Mr. Polly and the Airlie family were neighbors, but they did not get along. Firstly, the two families had different beliefs. Mr. Polly's family believed in the Black Knight goddess, while the Airlie family believed in the Storm of Lord. They had been neighbors for over a decade and had been arguing for just as long. But recently, Airlie had started keeping a giant dog in his basement. This giant dog occasionally escaped from the basement, destroying Mr. Polly's flower beds and even killing many chickens. However, Mr. Airlie refused to admit he owned a dog. Mr. Polly, unable to bear it any longer, asked a friend to find Hobert's law firm. Hobert asked, have the surrounding neighbors seen that giant dog? Are they willing to testify for you? They have. The Will family in front and the Allen family on the left have both seen it, and they are all willing to testify for me, Polly said. Go and judge him quickly, Mr. Hobert, let the Airlie family know how formidable I am. Hobert smiled and said, Mr. Polly, I am just a lawyer, not a judge. He said, before going to the magistrate's court, I will go and talk to Mr. Airlie. If he is willing to compensate you for your losses, it will be easier for everyone. If he wants to resolve the issue in the magistrate's court, we will accompany him to the end. Mr. Polly said, all right, lawyer, I'll listen to you. Actually, he also didn't really want to go to the magistrate's court, it was too troublesome. Hobert then asked, how much money do you intend to ask Mr. Airlie to compensate? £100. Lawyer, I want him to compensate £100. This compensation is too high, the judge will not accept it, Hobert said. I suggest a compensation of £10, plus £10 for the lawyer's commission fee. £20 was acceptable for a self-sufficient farmer. If it were truly £100 in compensation, the Airlie family would probably go bankrupt. Mr. Polly's pipe trembled in his hand. Goddess. You're asking for a £10 commission fee. Didn't your friend introduce you to our fee structure? Hobert smiled. This is already the lowest fee standard. All right, it's Airlie who'll be paying for it anyway. After discussing the details, both parties signed the contract. Hobert then asked Mr. Polly to take him to visit the Will family and the Allen family. Just as Mr. Polly said, they were all willing to testify for Mr. Polly because they had all seen the giant dog and were frightened by it. Finally, Hobert went to visit Mr. Airlie alone. Mr. Airlie was at home. After learning of Hobert's purpose, Airlie loudly declared at the door, I've said it countless times, it's that old fool Polly who's seeing things. Our family has never kept a dog. All right, if he wants to go to court, I'll see it through to the end. His voice was loud, and Mr. Polly, on the other side of the fence, heard him clearly. Old fool, we used to argue, but I still thought you were a man. But now, you're trying to default on your debt, and you look as ridiculous as a clown. Their argument triggered a series of dog barks. From the sound, it was clear that the dog was not small. Mr. Polly's words made Airlie's face flush. Seeing that the two were about to get into a full-blown argument, Hobert quickly interjected, Mr. Airlie, may I see your basement? The surrounding neighbors have all seen it, the giant dog came out of the basement. All right, Airily said, lawyer, I trust you. What I want to tell you is that your decision to be Mr. Polly's lawyer will definitely become a blemish on your professional career. As he spoke, Airily led Hobert to the outside entrance of the basement. The dog barks also seemed to be getting closer. But when the basement door was opened, there were only farm tools and miscellaneous items inside, no animals at all. Wait a minute. Hobert felt a familiar, distortion feeling. This was very similar to the feeling one gets when using the power of the lawyer pathway in the country of disorder. Hobert's first thought was the extraordinary characteristic aggregation law. If he wasn't mistaken, this seemingly ordinary case must hide a magical item or meander from the lawyer pathway. And the country lawyer Penny described when he handled Mr. Barron's case earlier could be 100% confirmed to be a meander from the lawyer pathway. Hobert smiled helplessly. I should have thought of it earlier. The country of disorder is a key element for the lawyer pathway and the arbitrator pathway to become an old one. It's like a giant magnet, attracting the extraordinary characteristics of these two pathways towards me. Then he reflected. In the past month or so, I still haven't completed the mental shift from the ad era to the extraordinary world. My past life experiences are certainly useful, but this is an extraordinary world, and its rules are more important. Seeing Hobert in a daze, Airily smiled triumphantly. How about it, lawyer? I told you long ago, our family has never had a dog. Hobert asked, then where did the dog barking we heard come from? Mr. Henry, who lives behind us, has a dog. Airily said, I think his dog must have run out, first came to my yard, and then went to that old man Polly's yard. As for them insisting that the dog ran out of my basement, I think Polly's old eyes must have seen wrong, and he didn't dare to question Mr. Henry, so he shamelessly blamed it on me. Coming out of the basement, Airily pointed to the black-themed house behind them for Hobert. That's Mr. Henry's house. The house gave off a desolate feeling. Its curtains and door curtains were tightly drawn, as if no one had lived there for a very long time. Airily explained, Mr. Henry's child seems to have a rare disease, with a pale complexion and fear of sunlight, so their house has always been so tightly sealed. Mr. Henry is a cloth merchant, with a stern face and a very unapproachable demeanor. The neighbors are unwilling to deal with him. Oh, speaking of which, their family seems to have not left the house for several days. Hobert exited through Airily's back gate and, upon arriving at Mr. Henry's doorstep, indeed heard dog barking coming from the basement. Hobert knocked on the yard gate, but there was no answer, so he pushed it open and knocked on the house door. After waiting for more than half a minute outside the door, he finally heard footsteps inside. The person's feet seemed unable to lift, their soles scraping the floor as they approached the door, and a very hoarse voice asked, "Who?" Hobert briefly introduced himself and then stated his purpose. "May I go down to your basement and see the dog kept there?" The hoarse voice said, "Our whole family has a very bad flu. If you don't want to get infected, come back in a few days." Hobert pondered for a moment before saying, "Okay, I'll be back again this week. I hope your cold gets better soon." Back at Mr. Polly's house, Mr. Polly heard that Airily's family didn't have a dog, but dog barking was coming from Mr. Henry's basement. Mr. Polly shook his head repeatedly. "Sir, although I am old, I am not yet so old that my eyes are failing. Besides, it wasn't just me, everyone saw that giant dog come out of Airily's basement." Hobert looked out the window. Airily's and Mr. Henry's basements were only separated by a small country road. Perhaps there's another possibility. He smiled. "Let's talk about Mr. Henry." "Oh, Mr. Henry is not an easy person to deal with," Polly said, filling his pipe. "Last year, a thief broke into their house, and Mr. Henry beat him into a fool who could only say, 'He's dead, he's dead.' Their family moved here when I was young. I even attended the funeral of old Mr. Henry. Oh, that's Mr. Henry's father now, little Mr. Henry's grandfather. Originally, their family was quite warm, but ever since little Mr. Henry got a strange illness 3 years ago, their family also became strange." Listening to Mr. Polly ramble on for a long time, there wasn't much useful information. However, Hobert was certain that Mr. Henry's family was definitely not ordinary cloth merchants. He decided to investigate further after receiving his payment from the hanged man. After informing Mr. Polly that he would be back in the next few days, Hobert bid farewell and left. As soon as he returned to the law firm, Hobert received a letter from the mercenary club. From yesterday evening to this morning, Private had already received 2 packages. Hobert didn't expect the hanged man's packages to arrive so quickly, but after a moment's thought, he understood. The packages must have returned with the mercenaries who were withdrawn from the South Continent, so the packages were brought to the club by the mercenaries. So, after lunch, Hobert went out again to visit clients. Hobert didn't rush to get the packages, but sat in the sofa area for a while. While drinking the black tea provided by the club, he learned from the conversations of other members that a batch of mercenaries who ambushed the Forsaken Empire Beyonders in the South Continent had indeed returned by airship. Many people already knew the specific results. They eliminated 2 Sequence 5, 6 Sequence 6, 17 Sequence 7, and several Sequence 8 and Sequence 9 of their old adversaries. Moreover, it is said that this time's spoils of war, besides extraordinary characteristics, also included many magical items and 2 sealed artifacts. It is imaginable that at this weekend's Beyonder gathering, many participants will be selling their spoils of war. Hobert calculated his current wealth, which was nearly £1,100. If there were suitable magical items then, he would definitely make a move. After drinking 2 cups of black tea, he went to the front desk to pick up Private's packages. Hobert didn't leave immediately. Instead, he asked a waiter to find him a small meeting room. After closing the door, he opened the first package, which contained £600 in cash. Hobert happily counted it once, then took out his wallet. The wallet couldn't hold it all, so he had to stuff it into his inner pocket. At this moment, Hobert somewhat missed life with online payments, where the money in his phone would not become a target for criminals like thieves and robbers. The other package contained a dark ring box. Hobert held the ring in his palm and felt no discomfort, so he put it on his index finger. The moment he put it on, more than a dozen ways to attack enemies with a cane immediately appeared in his mind, as well as how his footwork should cooperate with his attacks and defenses in combat. Hobert smiled slightly. This was exactly the ability he needed. He looked at the package shell on the table. It must be destroyed, to prevent others from tracing his identity. Tear it into pieces. No, what if someone picks them up and puts them back together? But how to destroy it? Fire. What if it causes a fire? Or, wait, Hobert belatedly realized that these worries were the negative effects of the ring. Hobert first bought a military-grade telescope from the mercenary club, then wrote a letter to Miss Hugh, asking if she still wanted to consult him about extraordinary knowledge. Regardless of whether she wanted to consult him or not, he asked her to come to the law firm tomorrow morning for a discussion. After asking a waiter to help mail the letter, Hobert prepared to go home early so as not to miss dinner 3 hours later. When he arrived at the entrance of the club's hall, he pondered whether it was safer to step down with his left leg first or his right leg first. When choosing transportation to leave, he worried whether the rented carriage would overturn or if the coachman would be a perverted killer. Bad review. Hobert, sitting in the rented carriage, thought to himself, I must give the hanged man a bad review. Is this caution? This is already being overly cautious, isn't it? However, Hobert never took off the ring. He wanted to adapt to the negative effects brought by the ring as quickly as possible. Ideally, as soon as a cautious thought appeared, he would be able to distinguish whether it was genuine caution or a negative effect from the ring. So, at dinner, Hobert was seen hesitating whether to pick up the sharp table knife. When going up the stairs, he was again contemplating which leg to step with first. When closing the door, he turned back to look several times, making sure he hadn't caught his clothes. Back in his room, the physically and mentally exhausted Hobert sighed. Indeed, gaining new abilities always comes at a price. The next day, to avoid missing his meeting with Hugh and thus disrupting his plans for the next few days, Hobert arrived at the law firm 2 hours early, at 7 o'clock. This was an hour earlier than regular working hours, and the law firm's main door wasn't even open. Looking at the tightly shut door of the law firm, Hobert, who hadn't even had time for breakfast, twitched his mouth, again feeling the urge to return it. However, sitting on the steps in front of the law firm and thinking for a moment, Hobert suddenly realized that his previous urge to argue with people had disappeared. After all, arguing with people easily leads to being beaten, so it's better to be cautious and not speak too much. Thinking this way, the negative effect of this ring wasn't entirely useless. All right, then let's keep it. So, it was time for naming. Hobert suspected that the extraordinary characteristic used to make the ring should come from a fighter of the warrior pathway, or a combat scholar of the seer pathway. The latter has a higher probability, because the negative effect of the ring likely comes from the provider of the extraordinary characteristic. Generally, beyonders of the warrior pathway wouldn't be so overly cautious. A scene suddenly appeared in Hobert's mind, a warrior on the battlefield hesitating whether to fire his gun. What if the gun backfired after firing? What if it harmed the enemy? What if the bullets damaged the flowers and plants? While he was still hesitating in the trench, the enemy had already occupied the position. This image was simply comical to think about. And seers, because they understand many ritualistic magics and knowledge, generally have great reverence for the extraordinary world and can easily become very cautious. Therefore, the extraordinary characteristic of the ring has a higher probability of coming from a combat scholar. Hobert thought, since the ring can turn him into a combat expert, why not just call it the fighting ring? Then Hobert thought again, could he use his extraordinary ability to counteract the negative effects of the fighting ring? More specifically, it means to distortion the cautious thoughts produced by the ring, because this is fighting against the negative effects. Regardless of whether the distortion succeeds or not, he can roughly distinguish which cautious thoughts are genuinely cautious and which are from the negative effects. This was a very good idea, so Hobert mobilized his spirituality and began to contend with the ring. He quickly found this method very effective. It really made it easier to distinguish which were negative effects, and under his distortion, he no longer had to hesitate over trivial matters like which leg to step with first. However, for more complex cautious thoughts, the effect of distortion was limited, and Hobert's hesitation was still evident. But he could already distinguish which were the negative effects of the fighting ring, which gave him a clear target when fighting against his cautious mindset. Around 9 o'clock, Hugh and Furs arrived at the law firm together, and Hobert received them in a small reception room. Hobert dragged his chair further away from Furs. He always felt that Furs would reach out and open a door on him, so for caution's sake, it was better to stay away from her. No, this is the negative effect of the fighting ring. So, under Hugh's and Furs's somewhat bewildered gazes, Hobert, with a somewhat distorted expression, dragged his chair back to his original position. Hugh asked worriedly, Hobert, did your leg cramp? No, Hobert said with a wry smile, I just felt the ground was a bit uneven. He quickly skipped this topic. Have you decided what extraordinary knowledge you want to get from me? Well, the action I mentioned earlier should preferably start this afternoon. If you haven't decided, you can choose to let me owe you an answer or explanation, or you can choose to let me pay you a sum of remuneration. Hugh said, we have decided. She glanced at her friend Furs. I have a friend. Furs cleared her throat and said, yes, I'm asking for a friend. Well, when the blood moon appears, she hears insane ravings. Why is that? Hobert, of course, knew the ins and outs. He mercilessly exposed her. Your friend is a Beander of the apprentice pathway, isn't she? Ah. Furs was startled. Yes. Hobert asked knowingly, is her surname Abraham? No. During the Fourth Epoch, the Abraham family had a relatively complete set of potion formulas for the apprentice pathway. Hobert elaborated, but ever since their ancestor, Bethel Abraham, disappeared during the Four Emperors' War, the Beyonders of this family have been as if cursed, hearing maddening ravings every blood moon night. I suspect that your friend consumed the extraordinary characteristic left behind by a member of the Abraham family without it being processed. So, even though she is not a member of the Abraham family, she has also suffered the Abraham family's curse. Hugh quickly asked, "That's right, your description sounds like you've heard it firsthand, like our mutual friend, Furs, telling her own experiences. Is there any way to fix it?" "There are two ways," Hobert said. Hugh was pleasantly surprised. She hadn't expected Hobert to have two solutions to a problem that had been plaguing them and left them clueless. "But both methods are very difficult," Hobert said. "The first method is to find a corresponding magical item to extract your friend's extraordinary characteristic, then process it, and consume the extraordinary characteristic again. As far as I know, the Abraham family once nurtured many apprentice pathway beyonders from other families. As long as the extraordinary characteristic is processed, and they are not members of the Abraham family, they will not suffer the family's curse." Hobert's method left Hobert and Furs bewildered. They lacked relevant extraordinary knowledge and didn't quite understand the feasibility of the method Hobert described. Hobert continued, "As far as I know, this method will be very painful and easily lead to losing control, so unless it's absolutely necessary or you have complete confidence, don't do it." The reason he mentioned this method first was to highlight his professionalism, which, to put it bluntly, was a bluff. He then added, "The second method is to wait and see your friend's luck." "Luck?" Furs asked, "What do you mean?" Hobert smiled and said, "Once you become a Beander, your destiny undergoes a tremendous change. All your problems will find answers under the arrangement of fate. Don't think I'm like a charlatan. The field of mysticism is inherently full of obscure and difficult to understand things." Furs frowned, currently dissatisfied with this answer. Hobert simply asked, "Can you be more specific? That curse is a cry for help." Hobert explained more clearly, "As far as I know, a mysterious existence has recently become interested in this cry for help. This is your friend's opportunity. Don't try to touch fate, just let nature take its course." For Hobert, the plot developing in the original direction was the most advantageous, as it allowed him to maintain his God's perspective. Hobert's words indeed stunned both Hobert and Furs. They remained silent, quietly pondering the meaning of his words. After more than 10 seconds, Furs finally asked, "So, the best thing to do now is nothing?" Hobert smiled and said, "Exactly. Observe everything around you carefully, and you will always find some revelations of fate. For example, the fool's honorific name that Audrey slipped into Viscount Roulan's collection, and, the fool's honorific name that Audrey slipped into Viscount Roulan's collection." Hobert added, "Perhaps when the situation is most uncontrollable, that's when fate turns." Hobert scratched his head. "Hobert, is fate really that magical?" Hobert spread his hands. "The fate of Beyonders is that magical." "All right, I hope you don't care too much about the arrangements of fate, because for us low-sequence Beyonders, we can only accept the arrangements of fate. The more you care, the greater the fluctuations in fate will be, and it only adds to your troubles." It was then that Hobert and Furs belatedly realized that Hobert seemed to be describing some highly advanced mystical knowledge they had never heard of or thought about. But Hobert seemed to have only described a part of this mystical knowledge. They hadn't seen the full picture of the knowledge. Hobert asked, "Are you both satisfied with my answer?" "Satisfied." Furs immediately said, This has given our friend great revelation. I think at least she understands the source of the curse and will no longer be so bewildered and lost." Hobert nodded. "Then let me talk about the next action. Last week, while handling a case, I discovered a villager who looked like a Beander. I'm very curious about where his potion formula came from, so I want to investigate." Hobert saw Hobert and Furs show confused expressions. He smiled and explained, "I'll give you both some free knowledge. The extraordinary characteristic within the three of us can all be traced back to the fourth epoch. Following the historical context, the potion formulas of the same sequence as Hobert are basically in the hands of the Ruin and Finapot royal family. The potion formulas of the same sequence as Miss Furs are basically in the hands of the Gnostic Society and the Abraham family, or in the hands of Beyonders who have an association with these two. I believe that after Abraham's ancestors disappeared in the fourth epoch, the Abraham family, without the protection of strong individuals, must have suffered attacks from other forces and sustained considerable losses. The extraordinary characteristic and potion formula of apprentice, in the Gnostic Society, formed at the beginning of the fifth epoch, should have come from the spoils of their attack on the Abraham family. And the extraordinary characteristic of the same sequence as mine should theoretically be in the hands of 3 or 4 Beyonder families, but since the Four Emperors' War, the context has not been so clear. Can you understand what I'm saying? Hobert nodded repeatedly, but from her expression, she clearly didn't understand. Furs thought for a moment before saying, so, if you figure out which forces most Beyonders of your same sequence belong to, you can use that as a clue to get subsequent potion formulas. Her eyes lit up. Mr. Hobert, this information you've provided is very important to us. Is it really free? All this time, she hadn't found the potion formula for magician at Beyonder gatherings. She had almost given up searching, but Hobert's words today gave her a new direction. Hobert smiled and said, "Of course it's free. Did you think I was joking when I said I hoped we would support each other when I founded the Justice League? Wake up, girl, free things are often the most expensive. After learning the clues to the potion formula, don't you want to know the Gnostic Society's intelligence? Do you want to take action? Can you and Hobert get the formula? If you can't get it, do you want to ask for help?" Hobert only realized today that he was truly a marketing genius. It was then that Hobert belatedly let out an, "Oh," this time she truly understood. Hobert added, "That villager who looked like a Beyonder seems to be a Beyonder of the same sequence as me, so I'm very curious about the source of his potion formula." Hobert asked, "When do we start the operation?" Hobert took out his pocket watch and looked at it. "It's not even 9:30 yet. Let's each prepare, and how about we meet at Backland Bridge at 1 in the afternoon?" "Okay." After seeing Hobert and Furs off, Hobert went to his rented room and, through the bestowed method, took the psychic necklace out of the country of disorder. The initiative for this operation was in Hobert's hands, unlike the previous investigation where clues were fleeting and there was no time to prepare, forcing immediate action. Since there was preparation time, he naturally had to bring all his strongest equipment, in case there was a need for psychic abilities later. After putting on the necklace, Hobert activated his spirit vision again, and the scene before him completely changed. The entire world turned gray, with only the living beings on the street outside having color. He was a little envious of this type of high spirit sense spirit vision. With just spirit vision, one could see if a person was healthy and their approximate current mood. Turning off spirit vision, Hobert suppressed the cautious thought of leaving early to avoid missing the agreed time. He returned to the law firm for lunch, then took a carriage to Backland Bridge. As expected, Furs also broke free from the embrace of her armchair and accompanied her friend on this operation. So the 3 young people took a rented carriage to the outskirts of Backland. To hide their tracks, Hobert, Zio, and Furs got off the carriage early, left the main road, and approached the opposite side of Apton's country villa through the fields. Zio found a good surveillance spot, and the 3 of them hid around it. Hobert looked towards the villa with binoculars. In the yard, there was a man in his 40s splitting wood. That should be Apton's male servant. Through the window, figures could be seen moving in a room on the 2nd floor. That should be Apton. However, after watching for a long time, Apton did not come out. Hobert took out his pocket watch and checked the time. It was only around 4 in the afternoon. He whispered, "We'll act after dark." Furs took the binoculars, taking over Hobert's watch on the distant farm. "Life here is so peaceful. I dream of having a life like this, if only. If not for the ravings of the full moon, she would definitely save money to buy such a small courtyard and spend every summer in its peaceful embrace." Hobert, however, smiled and said, "A dream is only precious when it remains a dream." Furs sighed. Although Emperor Rosel's words make a lot of sense, That's because he says them only after all his dreams have been achieved. I still don't know what it feels like when a dream comes true. Hobert twitched his lips. All right, all famous sayings come from Emperor Rosal. Amidst the trio's casual chat, the sun gradually set, and night fell upon the land. They waited until past 7 o'clock. The three of them had a simple meal in the wilderness. Hobert then gave Zio and Furs the masks he had prepared. Don't expose information like your voice or habitual movements, in case Apton has connections with some secret Beander organizations. After making their respective preparations, the three approached Apton's farm under the cover of night. Although this area was still part of Backland, it was already the outskirts of the outskirts. There was no nightlife to speak of. The nearby village had long since gone dark, with only one lamp still lit on the second floor of Apton's villa. Upon reaching the farm's courtyard wall, Furs stood guard outside while Hobert and Zio agilely jumped into the yard. During the afternoon wait, Hobert had already stated that he had obtained an extraordinary item that could enhance his agility. As partners, this was something that had to be communicated to avoid a lack of coordination during joint operations. However, Hobert did not tell Zio about the psychic necklace. Although he trusted Zio, he always needed to keep some trump cards. The two agilely climbed to the window on the second floor where a light was on. The light inside was dim, illuminating only half the room. They saw Apton's figure lying on the bed, as if he had forgotten to extinguish the oil lamp when he fell asleep. Hobert gave Zio a look, and the two pushed open the window and jumped in together. According to the intelligence Hobert had obtained, Apton was most likely a lawyer, or, at most, a barbarian. Even if he and Zio couldn't subdue the opponent, they could easily disengage from combat and escape. Therefore, Hobert suppressed many cautious thoughts and chose the most direct action to obtain the information he wanted. Upon entering the room, Hobert felt an abnormal chill. Although Backland in August was late summer, it was at most a little cool at night, but not as cold as it was now. Zio also realized something was wrong and did not blindly go forward. She stood by the window, which also meant guarding their retreat. Although this girl sometimes wasn't very bright, she was very reliable during operations. Suddenly, Hobert's spirituality was touched. He quickly activated his spirit vision and saw a person with a long face and disheveled hair standing not far from them. Hobert took a step back and immediately determined that the person in front of him was a spirit. Although it wasn't aggressive, it looked very frightening. The psychic necklace gave him the ability to discover the weaknesses of spirits, and combined with his lawyer ability to find weaknesses, the two together made Hobert almost immediately realize that this spirit's weakness was fire, which was why it stayed in the corner furthest from the oil lamp. Hobert stepped forward, grabbed the oil lamp, and threw it at the spirit. Crack! The oil lamp shattered, and the fire spread along the lamp oil, burning on the floor. Whoosh! With a whoosh, the spirit in the room quickly flew away. The moment the oil lamp hit the ground, a figure rushed out from a dark corner. By the light of the fire on the ground, they could see that the person was young, with obvious tension on his face. He threw a punch at Hobert's head, but Hobert deftly dodged it. After Hobert activated his spirit vision just now, he glanced at the bed and did not find any living aura on it. Instead, there was a person's aura in the darkness of the room. He guessed that Apton must be hiding there, so he was already prepared for Apton's sneak attack. However, Hobert was a little curious why Apton would be on guard. Seeing that his punch missed Hobert, Apton continued to attack, each strike seemingly possessing immense strength far beyond that of an ordinary person. Hobert, fighting Apton with his cane, did not fall into a disadvantage. He seemed to instinctively know how to attack his opponent and how to use his footwork to dodge enemy attacks. At this moment, he seemed like a born fighter. At the same time, Hobert also had time to think that Apton had already consumed the barbarian potion. His strength was astonishingly great, almost knocking Hobert's cane away several times. A lawyer couldn't fight like this. However, Hobert quickly discovered that although Apton's attacks were powerful, his speed seemed a bit slow. At this point, Zio joined the fight at the right time, and Apton completely lost the ability to retaliate. However, he retorted stubbornly, "Did the Tamara family send you two bastards to kill me? You're too naive." Apton's face suddenly turned pale, and Hobert abruptly saw that the room's door had opened. However, the other side of the door was an indescribable world. It seemed to be a realm of chaos, with no distinction of up, down, left, or right. It seemed to contain rich information, allowing every detail of that world to be seen, with nothing left to obstruct one's vision. After seeing this scene, Hobert and Zio felt varying degrees of dizziness. The spirit world. Hobert realized that this was the spirit world. Although low-sequence Beyonders, spirituality can perceive the existence of the spirit world, many Beyonders with high spiritual intuition can even directly receive revelations from the spirit world. However, at this stage, one cannot have prolonged contact with the spirit world, let alone enter it. After the door to the spirit world appeared, a humanoid monster with very long arms and tongue, and no eyes or ears, walked out. Hobert and Zio's spirituality immediately sensed the arrival of danger. The spirit, with long arms and tongue moved incredibly fast, and Hobert found he no longer had time to escape. However, the abilities of the psychic necklace and his lawyer allowed him to quickly discover that this spirit's weakness was water. Water. There was water on the table over there. But it was too late, it had already raised its long arm, which transformed into a scythe, like the god of death coming to harvest lives. HMPH. In a moment of desperation, Hobert spat at the opponent. Then, under Hobert's spirit vision, a very comical scene unfolded. The ferocious spirit carefully avoided the saliva on the ground. It was as if there was a landmine in front, and it had to carefully avoid it. Although Hugh and Apton's spirit vision couldn't clearly see all of this, their spirituality could sense that the danger seemed to have suddenly stopped. Apton's face was full of disbelief. "Damn it, this is the first time I've seen such holy water." At this moment, the spirit had already bypassed Hobert's saliva, so Hobert quickly spat again, and the spirit bypassed it again, and Hobert spat again. Thus, the previous entanglement turned into Hugh and Apton watching Hobert continuously spitting on the ground. Soon, Hobert's mouth was dry from spitting, and he shouted to Hugh, "Quick, spit towards 2 o'clock." Hugh keenly realized that saliva could drive away the unseen danger. But even though she was usually carefree, she was still a girl, and she maintained some basic decorum. Hobert had no choice but to gather a little more saliva and spit it towards the long-armed spirit, once again blocking its advance. "Hurry, I really have nothing left." Hugh then quickly spat towards the 2 o'clock direction. Hobert seized this opportunity, took a few quick steps, picked up the water glass on the table, and splashed the half glass of water onto the long-armed spirit. Whoosh! After a mournful howl, the long-armed spirit vanished without a trace. Apton began to gather the remaining spirituality in his body. It's not over yet. Hobert, now out of combat, finally had a chance to take out his gun and aim it at Apton, shouting with a dry mouth, "We are not members of the damned Tamara family. If you use any more sealed artifacts or magical items, I'll shoot you dead." Apton's spirituality was greatly depleted, and his face was paler than before. He gasped a few times before asking, "Then who are you?" Hobert commanded, "Hands up." Apton obviously didn't want to die either, so he quickly raised his hands. Hugh, with great tacit understanding, searched him and found a strand of hair shimmering with starlight on Apton's arm. This was a sealed artifact. Hobert handed Hugh the gloves he had prepared in advance. "Don't touch the hair directly." Hugh nodded, put on the gloves, took off the shimmering hair, and placed it on the table. Hobert repeated his trick, pointing the gun at Apton with one hand and taking out his medicine bottles one by one from his pocket with the other. He asked, "Have you heard of psychic communication?" Heard of it." Apton had a bad premonition. "I'm sorry," Hobert apologized sincerely, "interrogating you is too much trouble, and I also have to discern the truthfulness of your answers, so I will directly use psychic communication to get the answers I want." But you are a living being, and psychic communication will completely mess up your thoughts and logic. After I get the answers, you will become a person with the intelligence of only 2 or 3 years old. For this, I am deeply sorry. Apton's face instantly lost all color. Wait, you haven't even asked, how do you know I won't tell the truth? Judging from Apton's reaction, he did not seem to be a very knowledgeable Beander, because anyone who had experienced psychic communication or had been fully explained about it would know that Hobert's words were half-truths. Given Hobert's current spirituality and mental strength, he dared not use psychic communication on a living person. The vast amount of information in the other party's spirituality would severely impact his mental body. The final result would very likely be 2 more madmen in this world. All right then, Hobert said, I'll ask the first question. Where did your potion formula and the main ingredients for the potion come from? You saw earlier that I can communicate with the spirit world to defeat the spirit you summoned. Similarly, I can also perform divination. If you lie, I will immediately switch to psychic communication to ask. Apton quickly said, my potion formula and the main ingredients for the potion all came from the Tamara family. I promise, I will tell the truth. Hobert had not tried divination with the psychic necklace, but theoretically, since the psychic necklace could enhance the holder's intuition, it could also allow the holder to perform divination-like operations. Of course, Hobert couldn't use complex divination methods like a diviner, such as dream divination, but simple true or false answers could still be divined. He closed his eyes and silently chanted in his heart, Apton is lying. Apton is lying. Quote. After chanting 7 times, Hobert held his cane upright and then gently let go. If the cane tipped forward, it meant Apton was lying. If it tipped backward, it meant the other party was not lying. Hobert saw the cane tip backward, and he smiled. Very good, I hope you will always tell the truth. Second question, what abilities does the sealed artifact you just used have? What are its negative effects? Where did you get it from? Apton was intimidated by Hobert's divination, and he simply abandoned the idea of lying. This sealed artifact is called astrologer's hair. Father said it came from an out-of-control astrologer. It has 2 abilities. One is to vaguely pre-sense dangers that will occur within 6 hours, and the other is to open a door to the spirit world. There might be nothing behind the door, but most likely, an unknown spirit, with unknown purpose and abilities will appear, and this spirit will attack indiscriminately, regardless of friend or foe. The negative effect is that the wearer is very likely to attract the attention of certain existences in the spirit world. If used for more than an hour, the wearer will merge into the spirit world and will never be able to return to the real world. Hobert thought to himself, no wonder he knew we were coming to attack him, it was because of this sealed artifact's ability. But this ability and negative effect sound very much like a suicide sealed artifact. A spirit that attacks indiscriminately, regardless of friend or foe, certain gazes from the spirit world, never being able to return to the real world. Both the ability and the negative effects were terrifying enough. Apton continued, this sealed artifact was brought out of the Tamara family by my father. Hobert was startled. What is your family's relationship with the Tamara family? It seemed they were both enemies and able to bring out sealed artifacts from the Tamara family. Apton smiled bitterly. I am a member of the Tamara family, but when I was young, my father had been trying to leave the Tamara family. Why leave? Father said that the high-sequence powerhouses in the family were very abnormal, as if they were affected by some hidden contamination. Hobert suddenly recalled that the Tamara family was one of the 5 families that supported Blood Emperor Tudor in establishing his empire, and they also had a long history. It seemed to be a family that held the lawyer and arbitrator potion formulas, and due to a past marriage alliance with the Abraham family, they also possessed a portion of the apprentice pathways potion formulas and extraordinary characteristics. However, after the Tudor Empire's demise, members of this family seemed to rarely appear in public view. Even Hobert, who had thoroughly read the original novel, only vaguely remembered the general situation of this family and couldn't recall the specifics. This indicated that the family appeared very, very rarely. In Hobert's impression, if the extraordinary characteristics of the lawyer pathway were traced back to the fourth epoch, they were basically held by three families: the Solomon family, the Tudor family, and the Trensused family. The Tamara family had never produced a black emperor or a judge, which indicated that during the fourth epoch, they possessed at most sequence two extraordinary characteristics. However, after the Blood Emperor and Night Emperor fell, it was hard to say. Most Beander families gained sequence one extraordinary characteristics only after the demise of their old patrons. For example, Blood Emperor Tudor and Night Emperor Trensused obtained the sequence one extraordinary characteristics of the Black Emperor pathway because they helped the seven deities eliminate Solomon, thus ushering in the dual reign era. For Hobert, the Tamara family was like something hidden in a mist, with unknown strength and an unclear stance. And the high sequence expert was also affected by a hidden contamination. Hobert asked, "What kind of contamination?" Apton replied, "I don't know, Father didn't tell me, and perhaps he didn't know either. In any case, Father always said that the Tamara family was already unrecognizable and that I should rather die than return to that family." Hobert's spirituality suddenly gave him a warning, indicating that this question could no longer be asked or discussed further. He quickly changed the subject. "Your condition doesn't seem very good." This could be seen from the other party's aura. Apton smiled bitterly. "Yes, after I took the barbarian potion last year, my condition has not been very good. My mother told me that it was a side effect of forcibly advancing before I had properly controlled the lawyer's extraordinary abilities." He said with some sorrow, "Mother died because she failed in her forced advancement to astrologer." It was clear that their family did not know the concepts of acting and digestion. Hobert was somewhat puzzled. "You have all already separated from the Tamara family. Why would you still take such a great risk to forcibly advance?" Apton sighed. "My father's attempt to leave the family was discovered prematurely, but fortunately, Father's prior preparations allowed us to escape the family members' pursuit. But Father said that the preparations he made could only hide our family's tracks for 10 years, because the blood of the Tamara family flows in our veins, so after 10 years, the family members who are skilled in divination would immediately discover our whereabouts. To escape the family's pursuit, Father once tried to seek refuge with other forces, but those other forces were more interested in the sealed artifact in Father's possession and information about the Tamara family, so Father's seeking refuge led to even greater disaster. The powerful sealed artifact in Father's hands was lost, and he was also severely wounded. After he led me and Mother to escape the pursuers, he passed away not long after. Mother and I dared not contact other forces again. We could only raise our strength by advancing, but it was still too late. Father died, Mother also died, and I can only barely control the barbarian potion. If I continue to advance, I will immediately lose control." As he spoke, Apton's eyes reddened. 10 years have passed in the blink of an eye. Perhaps it will be next week, or next month, but the family members will definitely come knocking. Shu, who had experienced losing her father at a young age, felt some sympathy for Apton. "Don't think about advancing anymore, just run." Hobert also said, "My companion is right, staying here is a dead end. I'm not reconciled." Apton's eyes flashed with fire. "We just want to live a few free and easy days. I've wanted to be a merchant since I was a child. I want to do business and see the world at the same time. Why do I have to live as miserably as a fugitive?" Hobert put away his gun. "In this world, how many people can control their own destiny?" He gestured to Shu, and the two of them retreated towards the window, ready to leave. Apton suddenly called out to them, "Wait a moment. Can you help me escape the family's pursuit?" Hobert laughed. "There are only two of us. Do you expect us to fight the entire Tamara family?" No, Apton said. "My father once said that, according to the family's style of action, there will only be one sequence 6, 2 sequence 7s, or perhaps 2 sequence 8s, and one sealed artifact among the pursuers. As long as you can defeat them, I can use the method my father taught me to hide my tracks for another 10 years. Hobert's mouth twitched. do we look like we can defeat a Sequence 6? Apton said, you two should both be Sequence 9 or Sequence 8, but you have sealed artifacts or magical items on you. I guess you most likely belong to some organization, and I want to ask your organization for help. I can give you the astrologer's hair. Hobert shook his head. You should keep it for yourself. I still want to live a few more years. Having learned the source of Apton's potion formulas and the recent situation of the Tamara family, Hobert's objective had been achieved. As for the astrologer's hair, carrying such a dangerous sealed artifact was simply courting death. I can also give you the potion formulas for lawyer, barbarian, and briber. Apton quickly said, and the potion formulas for apprentice, magician, and astrologer. His father's previous experiences made him extra cautious. However, all these formulas have been hidden by me using special methods, so even if you commune with me, you will only get the lawyer and barbarian formulas. Upon hearing magician, Shu's eyes lit up. This was exactly the potion formula her friend had been searching for. Hobert, on the other hand, was sighing, marveling at how deep the foundations of Beander families truly were. Even a fallen family member still had a sealed artifact and so many potion formulas. He mused that if Christine were to act, it should be relatively easy to deal with a Sequence 6, which would allow him to obtain the briber potion formula and, in all likelihood, the briber extraordinary characteristic. Thinking this, Hobert finally said, if my elder is willing to help you, I will visit you again. With that, Hobert and Shu jumped out of the window. Apton sat powerlessly on a chair, repeatedly chewing on a single word, elder. Elder. Hobert's parting words were intentionally for Apton to hear. They were meant to deter Apton, and also to deter any Tamara family members who might kill Apton and perform a psychic on him in the future. Of course, he was also sending a message to Apton. You guessed correctly, I do have an organization behind me that can solve your problems. Hobert and Hugh met up with Furs, who was waiting outside, and the three of them returned to the fields. After confirming that no one was following them, Hugh excitedly whispered, Furs, we actually found a clue to the magician potion formula. They found a secluded spot to rest, and Hugh recounted their recent encounter. In the darkness, Furs glanced at Hobert. Hobert was more powerful, more mysterious, and had more bizarre abilities than she had imagined. Is this what you meant by a turning point in destiny? Hobert smiled helplessly. Perhaps. Girl, this is a clue not present in the original novel. I don't know how it will develop from here. He paused for a few seconds and then said to Hugh, after all, this will be an enmity with a Beander family, and I cannot make the decision alone. But if we help Apton, I will definitely notify you. Hugh nodded. I know. The three of them rested for a few more minutes, walked over 10 kilometers, and finally found a rented carriage. After entering the South District of Backland, it became brightly lit again. This metropolis offered a rich and colorful nightlife. Hugh and Furs got off the carriage more than a kilometer away from their rented room. It was already past 10 in the evening when Hobert took the carriage home. He had left a note in the morning saying he might be back late that night, so everyone in the house except for the butler, who was waiting for Hobert, had gone to sleep. Hobert drank 3 cups of water before returning to his room. He first took off the psychic necklace and the fighting ring. Carrying 2 sealed artifacts at once had greatly depleted his spirituality. After lying down on the bed, Hobert did not fall asleep immediately but began to reflect on his actions today. Upon seeing the entrance to the spirit world and the long-armed spirit, Hobert felt his actions had been somewhat reckless. The main reason was that he underestimated his opponent. After learning that Apton was the only one in the farm, he guessed that Apton must be a wild Beander who had stumbled upon an adventure. If he were a member of a Beander family, living alone in a certain place would be very risky. After only one person was left in the family, he would most likely go to rely on relatives, or relatives would come to live with him. This could effectively prevent loss of control and also prevent threats from hostile families or enemies. Although no one had expected Apton's family situation to be so special, Hobert still felt his actions were somewhat reckless. In similar situations in the future, he would need to conduct a thorough investigation before acting. Then he thought of the Henry family, whom he had met through the door yesterday. They were very likely closely associated with the lawyer pathway. This outcome was inevitable because of the extraordinary characteristic aggregation law. People or objects of the lawyer pathway would spontaneously gravitate towards Hobert, who possessed the country of disorder. Fortunately, Hobert was only sequence 9 at the moment, and the power that the country of disorder could project to the outside world through him was extremely limited, so most of the people or objects gravitating towards him were of low sequence. Of course, there was also a chance of encountering middle sequence or high sequence beyonders or sealed artifacts. These powerful individuals generally would not pay attention to a sequence 9. After all, Hobert also had backing. The Commodore's eldest son would provide him with much protection. Moreover, so far, powerful individuals could not sense the source material aura of the country of disorder on Hobert. Thinking of this, Hobert felt that the issue of the extraordinary characteristic aggregation law should not always be viewed negatively. This law also brought him many positive things. Just like Furs, she had searched for the magician potion formula for several years without success. Yet Hobert found a clue to the Briber potion formula when he took on his third case in life. This made the test set by the original owner's biological father not so difficult. Of course, this was not so difficult if Christine was willing to help. From this perspective, it was a good thing, as it gave Hobert more opportunities to obtain potion formulas and corresponding extraordinary characteristics. While this also meant certain dangers, as long as he acted carefully, most risks could be avoided. Moreover, the extraordinary world was inherently full of dangers, and some dangers could not be avoided even if one wanted to. With the fighting ring and the psychic necklace, Hobert believed he had the ability to fight some Sequence 8s and the ability to escape from Sequence 7 enemies. As for encountering beyonders of higher sequence, he would concede when he should and rely on his father when he should. There was nothing shameful about it. Finally, Hobert concluded in his mind, do not let laws and rules become a burden. Instead, actively use rules and laws to achieve more advantageous goals for oneself. Suddenly, that feeling of exhilaration reappeared, and Hobert discovered that his potion had been digested by nearly 1/3 all at once. Is this what a lawyer is? To be allied with rules, and at the same time, to know how to actively use rules. This should be a relatively core, acting principle. Hobert recalled the previous digestion of the potion, which was a clash over a contract between spirits. Abiding by the spirit of the contract was merely the most basic requirement for a lawyer. The core of a lawyer still lies in manipulating the law, which is the rules. The rapid digestion of the potion made Hobert so happy that he couldn't sleep for a long time. It wasn't until the latter half of the night that he managed to control his emotions and gradually fell asleep. South Continent, no existence town. There is a beautiful small mountain in the town, and the Bach family's council hall and the patriarch's residence are built on the mountainside. As the first ray of sunlight shone on the small mountain, 8 family elders arrived at the council hall one after another. Today, they were to discuss an important issue concerning the future development direction of the Bach family for a period of time. As the local powers in General Anthony's territory, they had already learned the news that the Forsake Empire's Beyonders had been ambushed by a group of mercenaries. This had created a power vacuum in General Anthony's territory. If the Bach family was willing and supported the Forsake Empire's rule here, they would have the opportunity to fill a portion of that power vacuum. The 8 elders took their seats amidst pleasantries. In fact, there were 9 seats in the council hall, but the patriarch's seat had been empty for the past year. It wasn't that the Bach family had no patriarch, but rather that the patriarch's condition was very poor. He had to constantly fight against madness and curses, so he had entrusted most of the general affairs to the 8 elders. Generally speaking, warlords like General Anthony, or rather, their colonial supporters, would dispatch a demigod and 5 or 6 Sequence 5 Beyonders to protect their interests in the colony. The presence of a demigod was more like a deterrent, Sequence 5 and Sequence 6 Beyonders were the ones who handled the practical affairs of the colony. In that ambush, the Forsake Empire lost 2 Sequence 5 Beyonders and several Sequence 6 Beyonders, which caused chaos in the colonial administration system. The Sequence 5 Beyonders of every country were basically in positions of real power, and for a time, the Forsake Empire and the War God Church could only transfer 1 Sequence 5 Beyonder to the South Continent. The Bach family, as a local power, had already learned of this news. This was an opportunity. If a Sequence 5 Beyonder from the family could be dispatched to help the Forsake Empire maintain the situation, it could secure some colonial interests. This deal was very worthwhile, with everyone getting what they needed, as no one wanted to always earn money from the assassin industry. Of course, the risk was also great. Currently, the Forsake Empire might welcome the Bach family's involvement, but once the Forsake Empire had sufficient manpower, they would likely seek to reclaim their lost interests. During the council meeting, 5 elders disagreed with sharing interests with the Forsake Empire, because the extraordinary characteristic within the family was too precious to its members, not allowing for any losses. And leaving no existence town meant facing huge risks and the potential loss of extraordinary characteristic. The current operational model followed by the family was still more stable. Calvin, as an elder, said before the final vote, "Before we make our final decision, I have something to tell everyone. There is a junior named Elliot." He briefly recounted Elliot's recent experiences. Bowen, an elder in his 30s, said, "This abnormal luck must be problematic. Elliot should be immediately controlled and thoroughly interrogated." Chester, a demigod elder in his 40s, said, "Doing so might reveal that he has no problems at all." "I think so too," Calvin said. "We'd best observe Elliot quietly, and if there's an opportunity, we can even test him, but we must never interrogate him without certainty." Calvin changed the subject. "The reason I mentioned Elliot is to remind everyone that the Bach family might be facing new challenges, just like the barbarian, extraordinary characteristic that Elliot suddenly brought back. Is this a test for us? We cannot use our old ways of thinking to solve current problems. Furthermore, our method of using Rex to counter curses has led to a rapid increase in strength over the past 20 years. From the original 5 Sequence 5 Beyonders, we now have 3 saints, with the Patriarch still being a Sequence 3 Beyonder, and 17 Sequence 5 Beyonders. Such strength is entirely capable of controlling 2 warlords in the South Continent. It's time for us to show the world our strength. As long as the Forsake royal family knows we are a demigod family, it's impossible for them to casually turn against us. Allow me to quote Rosal, "Opportunity always coexists with risk. It's time for us to abandon some conservative strategies." After these words, the elders fell into deep thought. Backland, in Furs and Hugh's rented apartment. Early in the morning, Furs was lounging in the armchair. "Are you sure?" Hobert said. "Elder, at the time." Hugh ate his breakfast. "I'm sure." "Furs, you've asked 3 times already. This is very important," Furs said seriously. "Didn't your investigation say he was the Brigadier General's son? It's not surprising that his father is a Beyonder. But he didn't say, 'Father,' he said, 'Elder.' This indicates that there must be more than one Beyonder among his father's generation." "We guessed right, he comes from a Beyonder family." Hugh nodded. "Otherwise, he couldn't possibly know so much extraordinary knowledge." "Hugh, you completely missed the point." Furs's eyes suddenly gleamed with wisdom. She lit a cigarette. "He drove away the spirit from the spirit world. Such an operation requires strong spiritual perception and corresponding extraordinary abilities. If I'm not mistaken, he must still have a sealed artifact that he hasn't told us about." She sighed with emotion. "It's good to be born into a Beyonder family. For us, sealed artifact are unattainable, yet he has 2 of them." Hugh, who had finished breakfast, suddenly said, "Perhaps all his sealed artifact were acquired by himself." "Why would you say that?" I just feel that he is not someone who likes to rely on others." Say what you will. Through her interactions with Hobert, Furs found that Hugh and Hobert had more of a camaraderie like comrades, and she had already basically trusted Hobert, no longer worrying about Hobert, playing with a maiden's feelings, or anything like that. She said, "No matter what, having such a friend will indeed bring us many opportunities." For example, she had searched for the magician potion formula for so many years without success, yet the first time she acted with Hobert, she got a clue to the potion formula. In the morning, Hobert took a rented carriage to the West End again. He planned to visit Mr. Henry's family again. He knew that this visit would certainly carry some risk, but a little thought would reveal that this risk was controllable. The Henry family had lived in the town for so many years, they would certainly not expose themselves unless absolutely necessary. So Hobert believed that as long as he wasn't crazy enough to try to seize their sealed artifact, there would be no danger. Of course, more importantly, Hobert decided last night that since the Henry family was attracted by the extraordinary characteristic aggregation law, there must be a reason for his appearance. Actively contacting them, turning risk into opportunity, this was a kind of use of rules, and also a kind of acting. If one chose to ignore it due to potential risks, it was very likely that due to the extraordinary characteristic aggregation law, a greater risk would truly erupt at some point. Since it couldn't be avoided, it was better to actively face it. Opportunity and risk usually coexist. Thinking of this, Hobert suddenly felt a bit curious, wondering if Emperor Rosal had ever said similar words. Hobert first went to Mr. Polly's house. After a brief conversation, Hobert left through Mr. Polly's backyard and went to visit Mr. Henry again. Polly and Airlie were both in their backyards, watching this bold young man enter the Henry family's yard. Hobert's intrusion immediately caused a burst of barking. Now even Polly began to doubt if he had really mistaken it, and if it was Mr. Henry's dog that had trespassed into his own yard. He then shook his head, because many people had seen that the giant dog had run out of Airlie's basement. Just as Hobert was about to knock on the door, he immediately felt an aura of death and decay. Opening his spiritual vision, there were no living creatures left in the entire house. Did the Henry family die of plague? Call the police. Or explore first? Soon, Hobert made a decision. He kicked open the door and saw two highly decomposed bodies in the living room. Hobert immediately felt his scalp tingle. Judging by the appearance of the bodies, they had probably been dead for over a week. Then the question arose, who was talking to him through a door the day before yesterday? Polly and Airlie were both startled by Hobert's actions. How could he kick open the Henry family's door without even knocking? Hobert tried to suppress the fear in his heart. He saw the candles next to the two corpses, the inverted triangular mystical symbols, mystical materials, books, and so on, and roughly understood what had happened. Mrs. Henry should have performed a mystical ritual a few days ago. Since a ritual was to be performed, a spiritual wall would definitely be needed. However, it was unknown whether something went wrong during the ritual process or if the ritual they performed itself was problematic. In any case, Mrs. Henry died during that ritual. Because of the existence of the spiritual wall, their spirituality did not immediately dissipate, so when Hobert came to knock on the door, they could still respond. Of course, it's also possible that the ritual made their state very strange, and they might not even know they were already dead. The decaying corpses could still move within the spiritual wall, and they were using excuses like flu to drive away strangers who might interrupt the ritual. But as the spiritual wall gradually dissipated, Mrs. Henry's spirituality also gradually disappeared, which led to the scene before them. However, what was strange was that there were no extraordinary characteristics next to either corpse, meaning Mrs. Henry were not beyonders. Originally, Hobert wanted to go inside and simply check the situation, but the situation inside seemed a bit complicated, so he certainly couldn't act blindly at this time. Relatively speaking, reporting was a better choice, and it was also the Tarot Club's specialty. So he said to Polly and Airlie in his backyard, "Go call the police quickly and say that the Henry family died mysteriously. Be careful, be sure to state that it was mysterious death." The two farmers first looked surprised, and soon Polly reacted first. Okay, I'll go now." "Wait," Hobert said, Taking out paper and pen from his briefcase, "Please also send a telegram for me." He wrote on the paper, "Polly's neighbors died mysteriously, and I may be subjected to some special interrogation." Then he wrote on the back of the paper, 112 Bamingland Street, Joe Wood District, for Barton Lawyer. The back is the telegram's receiving address and recipient. Hobert then took out a 2-Sewell banknote and carefully instructed, "Please send the telegram first, then call the police." The telegram would reach Barton Lawyer within 2 or 3 hours. If sent by mail, even in the same city, it would not arrive until the next day. The reason he notified Barton instead of directly notifying Christine was that messages sent by civilian telegrams might not reach Christine, so it was safer to have Barton notify her. Holly nodded repeatedly. "Okay. A telegram certainly wouldn't cost 2 Sewell. For the sake of this banknote, he would send the telegram first." The dog in the basement probably realized someone had invaded its owner's territory, and its barking grew louder, accompanied by scratching noises against the basement's outer door, as if it would burst open at any moment. Fortunately, the Henry family's basement door was sturdy enough that it seemed unable to get out for a while. Hobert saw the children from the surrounding farmhouses peeking over, so he said to Airlie, "Mr. Airlie, please guard the courtyard gate and don't let anyone in. Believe me, if the children see what's inside, they will be frightened." It wasn't the busy farming season yet, so children weren't needed to help in the fields, which meant there were many children playing together in the small town. Okay. Airlie was about to come out of his own backyard when suddenly, the Henry family's basement outer door fell silent. The world seemed to suddenly quiet down, and then Hobert's spirituality seemed to sense a surge of distortion power. Crash! Airlie's basement outer door was suddenly crashed open by a huge force. His basement didn't have animals and wasn't reinforced, so it opened with one crash. A giant dog, almost the size of a donkey, rushed out of the basement. Woof! Many tumor-like growths were on its fur, some of which had already broken open and were oozing brown pus. Because of the presence of the tumors, its entire face was deformed. It looked ugly and ferocious, but also very pained. Hobert's forced entry clearly completely enraged it. There was no longer any sanity in its cloudy eyes, and it charged towards Airlie, who was closest to it. "Get down!" Hobert shouted a warning while drawing his gun and rushing towards Airlie's house. Airlie, upon seeing the giant dog, could no longer move his legs. Hobert's warning, and the gun in his hand, made Airlie instinctively drop to the ground. Bang, bang, bang. Only then did Hobert dare to fire. The first shot missed the giant dog, the second hit its shoulder, and the third hit its head. After 3 shots, the giant dog fell to the ground, and both Hobert and Airlie breathed a sigh of relief. The giant dog had not died immediately. Its eyes were no longer cloudy, it seemed to have regained its sanity in its dying moments, and was now whimpering towards the Henry family's house. Hobert said to it, "Your master is waiting for you ahead, and you can finally be free." The giant dog seemed to understand Hobert's words, stopped whimpering, and died peacefully. Its large size and the symptoms on its body indicated that it had been contaminated by extraordinary characteristics or a sealed artifact. This kind of contamination was irreversible, and Hobert didn't lie to it. Death was a release for it. And the reason it could appear in Airlie's basement should be the ability of the Henry family's sealed artifact, which could distort space within a certain range and connect to nearby basements. After Mrs. Henry died, no one continued to seal the sealed artifact, so it contaminated the Henry family's dog and would occasionally display its abilities. Since it was a distortion power, it should be a sealed artifact from the lawyer pathway, though it could also be from the apprentice pathway. However, according to the extraordinary characteristic aggregation law, the former is more likely. Hobert helped Airlie up from the ground. Airlie still felt some lingering fear looking at the giant dog's corpse, storms above. What kind of monster is this? How did it get into my basement? Please keep an eye on the Henry family's courtyard gate. Hobert didn't intend to explain to him, he'd leave that headache to the official beyonders. Hobert then asked Airlie, What was the Henry family's belief? Black Knight Goddess, airily said, supported by Hobert, as they arrived at the Henry family's courtyard gate. Hobert nodded, meaning that night watchers would handle this case. Airily leaned against the doorframe and shouted loudly at the children who had come to gawk, "All of you, get back." With Airily guarding the entrance, Hobert confidently went to the basement's outer door, kicked it open, and was hit by a strong smell of dog feces and urine. Inside was pitch black, as if the sunlight from outside couldn't penetrate at all. All signs indicated that the sealed artifact was still operating. Hobert returned to the house door. Some of the books next to the corpses seemed to be notes and some were actual books. There was a certain probability that the sealed artifact's effects and sealing methods were recorded in the notes. So Hobert stepped into the house. After observing Mrs. Henry's corpses to confirm they were thoroughly dead, he knelt down to search for the notes. Thump, thump. Suddenly, a sound similar to a door being hit came from the second floor. Thump, thump. Hobert pulled out his gun again, looking upstairs vigilantly. The thumping sound against the door stopped after a few knocks. Hobert, of course, wouldn't act like a horror movie protagonist and go investigate as soon as he heard a sound. He quickly picked up a notebook, retreated to the yard, and flipped through it. Opening the notebook, the flyleaf showed an abstract pattern of a scepter and a sword, which looked very much like a family crest. As for which family it was, Hobert wasn't sure, but he quickly found the answer in the notebook. This was the Solomon family crest, meaning the Henry family was actually a descendant of the Solomon family. Hobert smiled as if he had expected it. It was indeed a Beander family of the lawyer pathway. After the ancient sun god fell, Solomon, with the support of the true creator and Rose's redemption, became the ruler of the North Continent, ushering in the Solomon Empire era. Later, the six gods reached an agreement to jointly eliminate the true creator. Under their assault, the true creator was forced to flee to the forsaken land of the gods, with some of his followers. And the Black Emperor Solomon became a casualty of this struggle. From that time on, the Solomon family was hunted by all the Orthodox churches. Such a large family as Solomon surely had survivors, and Solomon even resurrected once later, establishing the Solomon Second Empire, which revitalized this Beander family. During the Four Emperors' War, Solomon fell again. The six gods supported families like Augustus and Castile to govern, and human secular power was no longer held by true gods, marking the beginning of the fifth epoch. The Solomon family also went into hiding again, awaiting Solomon's next resurrection. However, in the past few centuries, there had been no news of the Solomon family's descendants, so it was believed that their strength had likely significantly weakened over the long years. More than 100 years ago, Emperor Rosal forcibly jumped to a non-adjacent sequence, becoming the new Black Emperor, and Solomon completely fell. This must have been another heavy blow to the Solomon family. The content of the notebook confirmed the knowledge in Hobert's mind. In the early Fifth Epoch, to evade the pursuit of the Orthodox churches, the survivors of the Solomon family fragmented, spreading across the North Continent as individual families. The Henry family was a descendant of one of the families that scattered back then. According to the notebook's records, the last time they heard from other family members was more than 200 years ago. At that time, a young family member wanted everyone to live together again, establish a secret Beander organization, and seize an opportunity to restore their ancestors' glory. However, long-term dispersed living had turned this Beander family into a scattered mess. It was unknown how other families chose, but the Henry family chose to refuse. Thus, this family lived carefree for over 2 more centuries until, in modern times, the Henry family's lineage dwindled, leaving only their family of 3. Besides recording the family's history, the notebook also contained much extraordinary knowledge. For a wild Beander, this knowledge was extremely valuable, showcasing the depth of a Beander family's heritage. At the same time, the notebook also mentioned that they possessed a sealed artifact of the Solomon family, but unfortunately, it didn't record how to seal it. Hobert also noticed new handwriting in the blank spaces concerning some death domain rituals in the notebook. Combining this with the inverted triangle mystical symbol used in the ritual performed by Mrs. Henry, it could almost be concluded that what caused Mrs. Henry's death was likely a ritual from the death domain. How bold! Hobert sighed, daring to perform a death domain ritual without a normal death response and lacking sufficient mystical knowledge. At this moment, 2 police officers accompanied Mr. Polly to the Henry house. Upon seeing the situation inside, the middle-aged police officer immediately said to the young officer, "Go send a telegram quickly. Say that a case we cannot solve has occurred here and request special support from headquarters." It seemed the middle-aged police officer knew some procedures for handling such extraordinary cases. Then, the middle-aged police officer did not enter the house but instead questioned Hobert and Airily to understand the details of the case. Hobert's description was clear-minded and logically rigorous. The middle-aged police officer smiled and said, "If every caller explained things as clearly as you, our work would be cut in half." Then he introduced himself. "You can call me Officer Daniel, Mr. Hobert. Before police support arrives, I need your assistance in guarding the scene." Hobert was the true caller, so of course, he couldn't just leave. Hobert also knew this, and he said, "Gladly." After Polly saw the giant dog's corpse in Mr. Airly's backyard, he began to complain to Officer Daniel, "Look, officer, it's that dog, it." Daniel raised a hand. "I don't have time for your trivial matters right now." He had just heard Hobert's description and already realized this was a case involving mystical elements. He wouldn't speak carelessly before special support arrived. Polly shrank his neck and said nothing more. Daniel came to the entrance of the Henry house, took out a handkerchief, covered his nose, and asked Hobert, "Has anyone gone inside?" Hobert raised the notebook in his hand. "Only I went in to take a look at this notebook." Thump thump thump. Just as he said this, the thumping sound from upstairs resumed. Hobert was filled with curiosity about this sound. He knew it might indicate danger, but he still couldn't quell his curiosity. Daniel first stepped back in surprise, then thought, "Doesn't the Henry family have a seriously ill child? He should still be upstairs. If I let little Henry cry out inside and didn't offer timely help, that would be a disgrace to me." The key was that his superior and people from the special department would arrive soon, and it would be difficult to explain if he did nothing. "I'll go with you," Hobert said. He seemed to understand why he had such curiosity. It might be the sealed artifact attracting him. It wouldn't be bad to witness the sealed artifact's abilities before the official Beyonders arrived. Considering the sealed artifact's attraction to him, Hobert believed it should be a sealed artifact of the lawyer pathway or the arbitrator pathway. Such sealed artifacts are generally related to laws or rules, which Hobert was proficient in, so there wouldn't be too much danger. "What a kind young man," Daniel said. The two of them checked their weapons and went upstairs together. It was somewhat comical that Hobert drew his gun on the stairs, while Daniel only had a police baton. Thump thump thump. Little Henry seemed to hear someone coming upstairs, and the frequency of him banging on the door increased. Daniel had originally wanted to call out little Henry's name to soothe him, but for some reason, in such an environment, he felt a little unable to open his mouth. Thump thump thump. This sound was like a death knell. Daniel regretted coming upstairs, but they had already arrived at the bedroom door from which the banging sound was coming. Hobert used the spiritual vision provided by the psychic necklace to confirm again that there were no living corpses left in the room. He raised his cane with one hand, held his gun with the other, and kicked the bedroom door open with his foot. This was already the third time he had breached a door today, and he felt his door-kicking movements becoming more and more proficient. With the door wide open, Hobert and Daniel first saw a child of 7 or 8 years old, with a pale face, cloudy eyes, and fangs. This must be little Henry. After seeing the two living people at the door, he let out a sound like crying and like a night owl's call, and immediately pounced towards Daniel. Hobert, seeing that this was just an ordinary living corpse, relaxed and smiled at Daniel, saying, "He wants you to hold him." Daniel also realized something was wrong and quickly dodged to the side, but the small living corpse was hit by Hobert's cane, who was already prepared, and crashed into the wall. This blow was not light. The small living corpse was like mud splattered on the wall, motionless. Daniel's mouth hung open. You killed him. At this moment, the small living corpse moved its neck again, came down from the wall, and rushed towards Hobert. Hobert said to Daniel, "Look, he's alive again." As he spoke, Hobert fired 2 shots, blowing the small living corpse's head apart, but no blood flowed out, there was only some brownish liquid on the ground. The living corpse finally fell to the ground, silent. Daniel swallowed his saliva. Even if he was stupid, he realized that little Henry's condition was very abnormal. Hobert ejected the spent casings and reloaded his gun. "Officer, I think it's best not to disclose what happened upstairs to Polly and the others." Daniel nodded repeatedly. That's right, that's right." Hobert glanced at the room where the living corpse had been. There was no furniture, the windows were directly blocked by wooden boards, and outside the boards, there was a layer of iron bars. The walls were covered with scratches. Recalling the scene from outside, all the windows on the second floor had their curtains drawn, and there was another layer of curtains outside the wooden boards as a disguise. This should be a room simply prepared for little Henry, not a place to store a sealed artifact. After a quick glance, Hobert turned and went downstairs, and Daniel quickly followed. While going downstairs, Hobert roughly understood the whole story. Little Henry might have died 2 or 3 years ago, when the neighbors learned he suffered from a severe illness that feared sunlight. Mrs. Henry, eager to save her son, wanted to use a ritual from the death domain to resurrect the child. As a result, by a strange twist of fate, little Henry was turned into a living corpse. For Mrs. Henry, who lacked sufficient mystical knowledge, this should have been a welcome outcome. After all, the child seemed to have regained life. It is imaginable that ever since the Henry family's curtains were completely drawn, Mrs. Henry had been using mystical rituals to try to make little Henry return to normal. The thief who previously sneaked into the Henry home was not beaten silly by Henry, he must have been scared silly by little Henry's condition. Finally, in a ritual a week ago or even more than half a month ago, Mrs. Henry lost her life, and the sealed artifact in the house was no longer sealed, contaminating the dog kept in the basement. As the sealed artifact gained freedom, the Henry family's basement dog occasionally appeared in Airlie's basement. When it went out foraging, it trampled Mr. Polly's flower bed and killed Mr. Polly's chickens. Back in the yard, Polly and Airlie had already retreated to the yard gate because of the gunshots earlier. Seeing Hobert and Daniel come down, they quickly went forward to inquire. Hobert explained, "Little Henry also died. The banging sound just now was made by a bird that flew into the room. I fired 2 shots and killed the bird." Daniel had lost the momentum he had before going upstairs. He chimed in, "That's right, that's right." After more than half an hour, several more police officers arrived. In an instant, the area in front of the Henry family's door was filled with carriages, and the officers dispersed the curious residents, leaving only Hobert, Polly, and Airlie, who might be related to the case. Around noon, a carriage with a dark holy emblem on its door entered the town. Hobert perked up, the main characters had arrived. The carriage stopped at the courtyard gate, the door opened, and first, a cold gentleman with a scar face on his side profile descended. His yellowish-brown eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. Behind him, a lady with emerald-green eyes, wearing blue eyeshadow and blush, descended. She exuded a seductive beauty. Hobert was stunned. Could this be Miss Daly? The lady seemed to sense Hobert's gaze. She smiled at Hobert and said, "Don't look at me like that, I'm not interested in young boys." Hobert's mouth twitched. It was undoubtedly Daly. He smiled helplessly, thinking, "Madam, I have met Audrey. I have that much mental fortitude. What kind of look could I give you?" Miss Daly and her companion began to inquire about the case. Daniel gave his report. While listening to the report, the 2 official Beyonders looked at Hobert multiple times, clearly having guessed that Hobert was a Beyonder through his previous reactions. Then the 2 official Beyonders told all the police officers to wait outside but asked Hobert to come inside with them. The Scarface man closed the door whose handle had been kicked broken, then stared sharply at Hobert. Before the other party could speak, Hobert spoke first. I am Brigadier General Christine's eldest son, not a wild Beander. I have an obligation to assist you, but that is all. If you want to arrest me, I'm sorry, I will resist arrest. Even if you have legal immunity, I will sue you in court and let everyone see how the church deals with military personnel. The Scarface man said coldly, resist arrest. Do you have the ability? Hobert placed one hand on the gun handle and said, you can try. Generally speaking, official Beyonders have strong hostility towards wild Beyonders. Hobert's words just now were not a threat, but rather to tell them not to act rashly. I will assist you, but if you go too far, don't blame me for blowing things up. All right, two gentlemen, let's first figure out what's going on here. Dai Li said meaningfully to Hobert, you are very smart. She said, since you are so smart, tell us what's going on here. Hobert began by describing how he received Mr. Polly's commission, his conjectures about the giant dog's condition, and his conjectures about the ritual performed by Mrs. Henry, which were missing from Daniel's report. When these conjectures were spoken, even the Scarface man looked at him with new respect, because making these conjectures required rich mystical knowledge and strong logical ability. Dai Li finally concluded, so, there is still an unsealed sealed artifact in the basement. Since no sealed artifact was found on the first or second floor, it could only be in the basement. Miss Daly asked, based on your description, the sealed artifact seems to be able to distort space within a certain range. Yes. Hobert helped analyze, theoretically, the distortion ability is very similar to the extraordinary ability of the lawyer sequence, but the distortion of the lawyer sequence is mostly about distorting thoughts and rules. However, a sealed artifact can't be judged by common sense. He did not continue speaking, pretending that his knowledge was limited. Dai Li nodded slightly and added, the extraordinary ability closely related to space belongs to the apprentice sequence, but their abilities are mostly about traversing space, not distorting it. She said, let me ask the little guys around. Scarface stepped forward, blocking between Dai Li and Hobert. Dai Li suddenly raised her head, her eyeballs turning completely black. She was now a necromancer, and could easily communicate with nature spirits. Immediately, Hobert felt as if countless eyes were staring at him. Mrs. Henry's bodies lay not far away, and the atmosphere of the entire room became eerie. After about 10 seconds, the motionless Dai Li seemed to suddenly wake from a deep sleep, shivering all over, and her pupils and whites of her eyes gradually became distinct again. The little guys around said that this couple often entered the basement with burning sunflowers in hand, Dai Li said. But as for what exactly is in the basement, they don't. Just as she was speaking, the three of them suddenly looked towards the altar, feeling a powerful, terrifying force quietly descending. Hobert and Scarface immediately drew their revolvers. Scarface's revolver was much larger than a normal one, very much like the enlarged and extended revolvers Hobert had seen at the mercenary club. The three of them moved forward almost simultaneously, preparing to destroy the altar, but Mrs. Henry's bodies suddenly sat up. One of the bodies, eyeballs even popped out because it got up too quickly. As they tried to stand, their legs seemed to be out of their control. Their upper bodies desperately wanted to stand up, but they couldn't, no matter what posture they tried. Hobert, as if sensing something, looked at Miss Daly and indeed found her staring intently at the two bodies, fighting for control of the bodies against that terrifying force. Scarface first shot the symbols on the altar to pieces, then kicked the altar away. When he looked at the two bodies again, they were completely unaffected and still struggling to get up. Hobert activated his spirit vision and discovered some black tubular objects hanging from the ceiling, connecting to the two bodies. Those were the bodies' weaknesses. But the position where the black tubular objects hung down, that position was probably where little Henry's body was. To the second floor. Hobert shouted and was about to go up the stairs when the two bodies broke free from Dai Li's restraint, picked up a nearby chair, and threw it towards Hobert and Scarface. All three of them dodged agilely, but immediately after, Hobert felt his physical strength and reaction speed significantly decrease. Damn it. It's weakening. The chair that flew over just now allowed the bodies to complete the process of bribe. That means Mrs. Henry were not ordinary people, but their ritual made the state of their bodies somewhat strange, and no extraordinary characteristic had been extracted. At this moment, Hobert also thought that it was very likely that when Dai Li used her death sequence ability, she awakened the terrifying existence that had descended through Mrs. Henry's ritual. La la, la 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 la, la 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 la. At the same time, a clear, innocent child's voice came from upstairs, as if humming a nursery rhyme. Upon hearing the nursery rhyme, Hobert and Scarface felt their bodies stiffen to varying degrees. Hobert's heart grew cold. In a state of both weakening and stiffness, they were no match for those two bodies. Fortunately, the two bodies that rushed close suddenly started dancing to the tune of the child's voice. Looking at Dai Li again, her eyes seemed to have become even deeper, exuding a terrifying aura. Although the song had negative effects on Hobert and Scarface to varying degrees, it seemed to strengthen Dai Li's abilities, allowing her to regain partial control over the two bodies. Taking this opportunity, Hobert walked towards the stairs with somewhat stiff steps. The breakthrough should be with little Henry's body. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of footsteps descending the stairs. Little Henry's body was coming down the stairs. Its face was pale and greenish, its eyes deep and dark. The bullet holes Hobert had made in its head had disappeared. It looked like a little boy with an unnaturally pale face and unnaturally dark eyes. Dai Li dared not look at little Henry. I am not its match. It was then that they realized the Night Watcher squad had severely underestimated this mysterious incident, thinking it was merely a bizarre death, never expecting such terrifying power to descend, leaving even Sequence 6 Dai Li somewhat helpless. Hobert changed his running direction, lead them to the basement. Dai Li and Scarface's eyes lit up, and they quickly followed Hobert's pace. At the entrance inside the basement, many sunflowers were piled up. Each of them picked one up, and Dai Li rubbed her spirituality to ignite the sunflower. Scarface fired a shot in little Henry's direction, attracting its attention. Although the power that had descended upon little Henry seemed terrifying, it didn't seem to have very high intelligence. Attracted by the gunshots, it pursued them step by step. Dai Li opened the basement door, while Hobert used his cane to push all the sunflowers from the doorway into the basement. Dai Li held the sunflower in front to lead the way, and Scarface constantly watched the situation behind them. At this point, Dai Li no longer had the energy to control Mrs. Henry's bodies. Their dance abruptly stopped, and then they scrambled towards the basement door. They quickly overtook little Henry, and Scarface and Hobert continuously fired shots to impede their progress. After walking down the stairs a few steps, Hobert felt the stiffness in his body gradually disappear. This was not a good sign, it meant they had entered the range of the basement's sealed artifact. The light from the burning sunflower pierced through the darkness of the basement. Hobert remembered that when he opened the outer basement door, he couldn't see anything inside the basement even with sunlight shining in. Clearly, the burning sunflower, which symbolized the domain of the sun, had dispelled the darkness created by the sealed artifact. Immediately, the effect of the sealed artifact began to manifest. Dai Li, who was originally at the very front, suddenly appeared in the middle of the group. At the same time, Hobert suddenly appeared at the bottom of the basement. It feels like riding an elevator. He held up the sunflower and examined the basement. The basement was very large, about 7 or 8 meters long and wide. First, Hobert saw a stone platform in the center of the basement, with a palm-sized stone statue on it. The stone statue looked very ancient, like a half-body human figure, but it had no distinct facial features. One could only vaguely make out that it was a half-body human figure. Seeing the stone statue, one could feel a surging distortion power, and Hobert suddenly felt its aura was very familiar. Looking at other areas, there were giant dog feces and chicken feathers. However, these feces and chicken feathers were all more than half a meter away from the stone platform, and the area around the stone platform was completely clean. This was very unusual, so Hobert stepped aside, not intending to rush to the front. Dai Li and Scarface, who came down later, also knew this was abnormal, but they could only rely on this sealed artifact of unknown ability to deal with the living corpses and little Henry behind them. At this moment, the living corpses had already rushed into the basement. Scarface gritted his teeth and quickly walked towards the stone platform. But when he was about half a meter away from the stone platform, he suddenly appeared on the other side of the stone platform. The three of them were all stunned. Then Scarface turned and went towards the stone platform again, and when he was still half a meter away, he appeared on the left side of the stone platform. Dai Li also tried, and the result was the same. She simply could not enter within half a meter of the stone platform. At the same time, they also had to carefully deal with the randomly appearing position changes. Currently, the random position changes were beneficial to them, as they could make the living corpses lose their target and briefly freeze in place for 1 or 2 seconds. Otherwise, the narrow basement would make it impossible to contend with little Henry and the living corpses. Hobert, who had been observing from the side, felt increasingly that this sealed artifact felt very familiar to him. Moreover, Dai Li and Scarface might not have noticed that when Hobert first entered the basement, after being moved from the stairs to the bottom of the basement by the power of the sealed artifact, his position had not undergone any new random changes. So, while Dai Li was fighting little Henry for control of the two living corpses, and Scarface was attacking little Henry with his pistol, Hobert walked step by step towards the stone platform. 3 meters, 2 meters, 1 meter, half a meter, and one more step forward, Hobert arrived in front of the stone platform. Dai Li and Scarface exchanged glances, both seeing expressions of surprise on each other's faces. Hobert reached out and touched the stone statue. Suddenly, he saw blue skies and white clouds. He saw the ancient town at the foot of the mountain, he saw the tall bell tower, he saw the stone throne on the mountaintop. That was the country of disorder. But that was a normal country of disorder. Blue skies and white clouds were in the sky, night and day were orderly, and the forest and bell tower were on the ground. So that's it, Hobert understood. No wonder he felt this stone was very familiar, it turned out to be from the country of disorder. But he didn't know how it left the country of disorder. And what did it experience to gain such a bizarre ability? Because of Hobert's special connection with the country of disorder, the stone statue resonated with him, so it did not reject Hobert. The moment he picked up the stone statue, Hobert's spirituality immediately sensed the abilities of this sealed artifact. First, it could create a dark area within a 7-meter radius. In this area, the holder could strip the enemy's vision and inspiration. Second, the holder could freely manipulate space within a 10-meter radius, and also perform a certain degree of distortion, such as making an enemy who was originally moving forward move backward, or making an enemy who was originally fleeing charge forward. Third, it could form a spatial distortion area half a meter around the holder, preventing enemies from approaching the holder. The negative effects were, for every 20 minutes of use, the holder's soul and body would be completely distorted once. After being distorted a maximum of 2 times, the holder's thoughts would become completely chaotic. After being distorted a maximum of 3 times, the holder's body would completely collapse. If a Beyander of the lawyer, pather and arbitrator did not use this sealed artifact, there was a certain probability that the sealed artifact would betray the holder. The sealing method was, use the distortion ability of the lawyer, path to distort the sealed artifact's few wills. This must be done once every 3 days, otherwise it will be difficult to enter within half a meter of the sealed artifact. If more than 3 days pass without distorting the sealed artifact's will, then a middle sequence, weakening, or distortion, is required to have a chance to regain control of the sealed artifact. Hobert sighed in his heart. This is a sealed artifact completely made for the lawyer path. No wonder the Henry family, even with only 3 members left, could still possess such a powerful sealed artifact. Hobert, Scarface's shout brought Hobert back to his senses. At this moment, little Henry had arrived in the basement step by step. The aura of death on him collided with the distortion aura of the sealed artifact. And the two living corpses had already been shot by Scarface's gun, losing limbs, but they were still charging at them. As little Henry approached, Dai Li's face turned pale, and it became increasingly difficult to stop the living corpse's actions. Hobert held the sealed artifact in both hands, and the two living corpses were instantly moved by him into the soil layer of the basement, with only their heads still exposed. They shook their heads, wanting to break free, but found it difficult to succeed. Then Hobert looked at little Henry, also wanting to trap him in the soil layer, but it was as if he encountered resistance from a massive force. Little Henry's eyes became deeper and more terrifying. Dai Li, who was of the same sequence, even felt the urge to prostrate herself on the ground. Ultimately, the sealed artifact had the slight upper hand. Little Henry's original attacking thoughts turned into defensive ones, and his original thoughts of bringing down more power turned into thoughts of reducing power. Little Henry, who was not highly intelligent, gradually had his eyes become cloudy after Hobert repeatedly distorted his thoughts and power, and he finally fell to the ground motionless. Hobert used the sealed artifact to move little Henry, who was lying on the ground, to within half a meter of himself, confirming that the power on him had completely disappeared. He said, "I'm very curious, when I encountered little Henry before, why was he only like an ordinary living corpse?" Dai Li examined little Henry's corpse and said, "That terrifying power just now was not originally on little Henry. After I performed the spiritual communion, little Henry's body underwent some changes, attracting certain gazes." She shook her head. This should be the ritual that Mrs. Henry constantly performed on him, which made certain mysterious existences very willing to bestow power upon little Henry. In other words, through the efforts of Mrs. Henry, they turned little Henry's corpse into a sealed artifact that easily attracted the attention and descent of power from powerful existences of the death path. Dai Li fanned her hand in front of her nose. "The smell here is unbearable. We'd better go back to the first floor to continue our conversation." Scarface instantly understood Dai Li's intention and lifted his leg to walk out. "Wait." Hobert suddenly smiled. "There are some things I'd like to discuss with both of you now." He currently held a powerful sealed artifact, giving him complete control, which was why Dai Li wanted to leave. It would be even better if Hobert put down the sealed artifact and left with them. Of course, Hobert wouldn't fall for it. Dai Li smiled. "You're a clever young man. Feel free to state your demands." Hobert said, "I'll say it again, I am the son of a Commodore. You don't need to treat me like a wild Beander. I can cooperate with your investigation, but only in a room in the church. Don't even think about taking me to the basement." Dai Li nodded. "You saved us just now, so of course, we will treat you with sufficient friendliness." Hobert said, "My second condition is to share the spoils of this operation. This stone statue belongs to me." Dai Li spread her hands. "I can't make that decision, but I can submit an application to my superior. I've already established a special connection with this sealed artifact." Hobert smiled. "This has allowed me to learn the method of sealing the stone statue." Dai Li was slightly startled. "I will include this in my report." Hobert said, "All right, I think we should clean up here." He had already weighed his options. Unless he escaped with the stone statue, he would definitely have to negotiate with the official Beyonders. The key was that in about 10 minutes, Hobert would have to release the stone statue he held. If he chose to escape then, Dai Li and her team would surely pursue him, which would put him in a very passive position. Thus, he made the choice to negotiate with the official Beyonders. Hobert used the sealed artifact to move the bodies of Mrs. Henry from the soil. Because the terrifying undead power was gone, these two bodies lost their vitality and became true corpses. Then Hobert moved all the bodies to the basement entrance. Hobert discovered that the sealed artifact's controllable space height was limited to only 3 or 4 meters, just enough to reach the basement entrance. Clearly, this basement was designed for the sealed artifact. Back on the first floor, Scarface went to the carriage to retrieve 3 body bags to put the bodies in. He also briefly explained a few things to the police outside and gave some instructions. Hobert and the 3 others then escorted the 2 bodies and 2 sealed artifacts back together. Because the stone statue needed a different holder every 20 minutes, and the new holder had to maintain a distance of more than 10 meters from the previous holder, Dai Li requisitioned a police carriage. The person holding the stone statue rode alone in the police carriage, following behind. When it was almost 20 minutes, the 2 carriages stopped simultaneously. A person from the front carriage went to the back carriage to replace the holder. Hobert first rode with Scarface in the Church of the Knights carriage in front. Scarface glanced at Hobert. "My name is Borgia." Hobert smiled. "Hello, Borgia. I believe I don't need to introduce myself, do I?" Borgia said. "Your response was brilliant. Thank you." Hobert, of course, knew that Borgia was referring to his brilliant handling of this extraordinary event today. After that, the 2 remained silent until Borgia replaced Dai Li. Dai Li smiled. "It's hard to imagine that you are only a sequence 9. When I first entered the extraordinary world, I didn't have your adaptability." Hobert politely said, "Just good luck." Luck is a crucial element in the extraordinary world. Dai Li got to the point. "I've been thinking, if you were a Beander with a military background, my superior would likely find it very difficult to agree to you using that stone statue. But if you are willing to become our informant, then it's different. I don't think the captain would refuse your request, especially since you've shown us enough goodwill." She said with a charming smile, "You can consider it before we return to the church." Hobert fell into deep thought. Establishing cooperation with official Beyonders was a very good suggestion. Previously, he had bluffed about having a military background, but if something truly happened, the military certainly wouldn't care about him, and only Christine would genuinely help him. As the saying goes, it's good to enjoy the shade under a big tree. With the endorsement of official Beyonders, he could naturally avoid a lot of trouble. Furthermore, using official Beyonders to provide convenience and assistance was also a way of using rules. After a few minutes of thought, Hobert said, "Yes, it's possible, but I have 3 conditions." Dai Li made a gesture for him to speak. "First, we are only in a cooperative relationship. I will provide you with some information you might need, and when I need it, you must also provide me with some assistance," Hobert said. "Additionally, within my capabilities, I will do my best to complete the tasks you give me, but I also have the right to refuse you. Second, if I am required to participate in combat, I have the right to share in the spoils. Third, I need an official Beander document. When encountering other Beyonders, this document will grant me the treatment of a regular Night Watchers member." Dai Li said, "Except for the 3rd point, which has no precedent, all others are reasonable requests. I will help you relay them." "Thank you." Then it was Hobert's turn to control the sealed artifact. After Dai Li took over again, they finally returned to the church. Dai Li was true to her word and confined Hobert to a separate room behind the church, leaving Borgia to guard outside the door. At this point, Hobert was completely relieved. He estimated that Barton had already received the telegram and informed Christine of his encounter. With Christine's intervention, he believed he would no longer be in any danger. Another 2 hours passed, the sun began to set, and dusk arrived. Hobert's stomach was grumbling with hunger. He asked Borgia outside, "Your superior is too inefficient." Just then, Dai Li entered, accompanied by a middle-aged man around 40, with short hair and dressed in a formal suit. His eyes were like a tranquil lake, giving off a sense of unprecedented calm. "That's because you made too many demands, and I needed to report to His Grace the Bishop," the middle-aged man smiled. Borgia called out, "Captain." After entering, Dai Li introduced, "This is our captain." The middle-aged man extended his hand, "You can call me Captain Thomas." Hobert stepped forward and shook his hand, "Hello, Captain Thomas." After the 3 of them sat around the room's table, Thomas continued, "You can freely use the sealed artifact obtained from Mrs. Henry's house today, but the sealed artifact must be kept by us. You only need to submit an application to me before using it." Of course, the premise is that you become our external personnel. Yes, external personnel. Thanks to Emperor Rosal for inventing this term, which makes our system more flexible. Hobert twitched the corner of his mouth, suddenly thinking of a certain group that always took the blame. Thomas said to Hobert, "Actually, I still want to persuade you to give up the right to use the sealed artifact. That way, you can get an extraordinary characteristic of a barbarian, or a briber." Hobert nodded imperceptibly. It seems the Night Watchers have found a way to extract the extraordinary characteristics from Mrs. Henry. Besides the 2 sealed artifacts, there are also 2 extraordinary characteristics. This case has yielded a good harvest. Then he lamented that his power was still too weak, which led him to make the most cautious choice at the time, otherwise all these gains would have been his alone. Furthermore, when dealing with official Beyonders, wild Beyonders are naturally at a disadvantage. Just like this operation, although Hobert made a huge contribution, when it came to dividing the spoils, the official Beyonders held the initiative. After a brief hesitation, Hobert made his choice: "I will still choose that sealed artifact." Once you understand the sealing method of the sealed artifact, you'll know why I'm so persistent. However, if possible, please keep those 2 extraordinary characteristics. In the future, I hope to exchange for them by purchasing or accumulating merit. Such a choice has both pros and cons. As long as official Beyonders are involved, he certainly cannot use the sealed artifact at any time, but it also saves Hobert the trouble of sealing the stone statue normally. Otherwise, he might have to rent a house with a yard to provide a 10-meter space for the sealed artifact. It seems you understand our system well, and even know about accumulating merit. Thomas smiled. No irregular personnel can enjoy the same treatment as regular members, but after consideration, I have decided to make some adjustments in handling your situation. This is because you played a significant role in today's incident, helping 2 Night Watchers escape, so I will try my best to meet the conditions you proposed to express our gratitude. First, we will provide you with a certificate proving that you are our informant, to prevent you from being attacked by other official Beyonders. You need to make some contributions to the Night Watchers to become our irregular personnel. When you make more contributions, I will issue you a formal member's certificate. At that time, you will be the only member of our squad who can act freely. Of course, you need to make enough contributions to leave other members speechless. Hobert bargained, "Can I directly be given an irregular personnel position?" Thomas shook his head. "Let me put it this way. We need to at least conduct some observations of you and watch you for a period of time to confirm that you will not do evil before we give you an irregular personnel certificate." Hobert understood. In other words, as long as I can withstand your observations, it will be easy to become your irregular personnel, but it's not that easy to become your formal member. Thomas smiled. Dai Li was right, you are very smart. Hobert then said, "Can I designate Miss Daly as my contact person?" "Of course, you can." "All right then," Hobert said, "please give me your informant's proof document." When dealing with official Beyonders, there is actually not much room for maneuver. For them, most problems they encounter have precedents or systems for resolution. Just as Thomas said, unless Hobert's performance convinces everyone and they are willing to modify the system because of him. After Hobert received the certificate and arranged the contact method and address with Dai Li, he then wrote down the negative effects and sealing method of the stone statue. Thomas also sighed. This is a sealed artifact designed for the lawyer pathway. No wonder you are so persistent. Hobert asked Thomas to wait a moment, and he also wrote an application form for the stone statue, with the reason for application being research. After receiving the application form, Thomas said, "I can't give it to you today. Come pick it up tomorrow morning." Hobert looked outside. Night had already silently fallen, and it was no longer suitable to enter Channy's gate. Hobert stood up. "Okay, then I'll come again tomorrow morning." "Can I leave now?" "Of course, you can." Arriving outside the cathedral, Hobert saw his family's carriage, and the butler was waiting by the carriage door. "Young master." Hobert smiled. "You've worked hard." It must be that Christine had already negotiated with the Night Watcher squad, otherwise Captain Thomas wouldn't have been so amicable. After returning home and having dinner, Hobert followed Christine to the study and recounted his experiences of the day in detail. It was a close call, but without danger. Christine commented, "Your choice was also very correct. Cooperating with the Night Watcher squad is more in your interest than falling out with them and snatching the sealed artifact to leave." Then Hobert told Christine about his actions with Hugh and Furs yesterday, as well as the information he obtained. Finally, Hobert asked, "Father, can you help me defeat the Tamara family's pursuers and obtain the Sequence 7 potion formula and extraordinary characteristic?" Christine smiled, "You're just like Rex, always getting into so much trouble. According to Rex's request, you must complete this test by yourself, but if you really can't solve it, I can help." Hobert did not expect that the original owner's father had such a move. "Alright then, I'll think about it again." The next morning, Hobert first went to the law firm to thank Barton for relaying the message, and then he went out again to visit clients. Taking a taxi carriage, he arrived at the Backland Night Watcher Squad headquarters in the North District. Yesterday, Hobert had exited through the back door near the church, and only today did he see the sign of the Night Watcher Squad, which read, Blackthorn Security Company. Hobert wondered if all Night Watcher squads used this name as a disguise. Upon entering, there was a somewhat old reception desk and a sofa area. Dai Li was already waiting in the sofa area. She pointed to the black box beside her hand. "This stone box can effectively seal 2 to 355. "Oh, that's the stone statue from yesterday. Only when taking out the stone box to use 2 to 355, you need to change the holder every 20 minutes. If it's kept in the stone box, you don't have to worry about the 20-minute limitation. 2 to 355. That means in the eyes of official Beyonders, the stone statue has the power of a level 2 sealed artifact." Hobert nodded, "Okay." He sighed inwardly, official Beyonders really have more methods. After agreeing on the time to return 2 to 355, Hobert carried the stone box back to his rented room. After confirming that no one was following or peeking, Hobert took out 2 to 355 and brought it to the country of disorder, through sacrifice. When he brought 2 to 355 into the country of disorder, the sealed artifact immediately resonated with the country of disorder. The material of the stone statue indeed came from the country of disorder. After Hobert held the stone statue in his hand, he felt that the country of disorder had many such stone materials, but his current control over the country of disorder was far from enough, so he couldn't use those stone materials. Immediately after, the scene of Hobert picking up 2 to 355 for the first time appeared before his eyes. After watching the orderly country of disorder again, the scene before him shifted, and a huge figure appeared outside the sky of the country of disorder. Hobert immediately understood that before, in the outside world, he could only see part of the information recorded by 2 to 355. Upon entering the country of disorder, 2 to 355 no longer held back, presenting all of its memories to Hobert. In the image, the gigantic figure was blurry, yet Hobert, within the country of disorder, still dared not look directly at it. Then, outside the transparent sky of the country of disorder, another massive city appeared, seemingly engulfed in towering flames, widespread floods, unsolvable plagues, violent earthquakes, and an ethereal yet terrifying aura. Hobert felt the resonance of the country of disorder, and his spirituality immediately enlightened him. That was another source material. It was the City of Calamity. The City of Calamity violently collided with the country of disorder, and for a moment, the sky collapsed, the earth shattered, and darkness enveloped everything. The sky and land, day and night, ancient towns and bell towers within the country of disorder, were all displaced by the impact. Thus, the current state was formed, with sky and land intertwined, and day and night coexisting. Although Hobert dared not look at the giant beyond the sky, he had some guesses about its identity: celestial worthy, God, original. Only these three figures could, for unknown reasons, control a source material to collide with another source material. At this moment, the scene before Hobert's eyes changed again. It was precisely because of the violent collision of the two source materials that 2-355 fell into the real world in the form of a stone. After an unknown period, the stone was picked up by a Beander of the apprentice pathway, as it came from the country of disorder, and was a natural magical item. Many figures appeared in the subsequent scenes, but their faces were indistinct. During a Beander battle, the Beander holding the stone was killed by a person emitting black holy light. Because the blood of the apprentice pathway Beander splattered onto the stone, it became a sealed artifact capable of distortion of space. At the same time, the Beander's unwillingness also splattered onto the stone, giving it a faint inspiration. Hobert guessed that the person emitting black holy light should be Solomon, or someone from the Solomon family. Immediately afterward, Hobert, through his own inspiration, sensed that if he injected the power of the country of disorder into 2-355, the ability of this sealed artifact would be strengthened to a certain extent. However, Hobert did not do so, because this sealed artifact was not yet completely his. It would not be too late to strengthen it after it fully belonged to him. After learning the origin of 2-355, Hobert then brought it out of the country of disorder, through the method of bestowal. Hobert rested for a while, waiting for his spirituality to mostly recover, before coming to the obsidian bar to return 2-355 to Dai Li. The obsidian bar was where Hobert and Dai Li would connect in the future, because Hobert was not part of an evil organization, nor was he an informant in the ordinary sense. He was more like a benevolent collaborator with the Night Watcher squad. Therefore, their meeting was not so secretive, nor was it so cautious. Dai Li, taking small sips of beer, asked, "Do you have any results from your research?" The obsidian bar was elegantly decorated. Its location in the North District, with its main clientele being the middle class, was completely different from the bars in the East District. There was a faint floral scent at the bar counter, not the smell of foot odor and sweat. There were not many customers in the morning, and the bar looked quite empty. Hobert, sitting next to Dai Li, pointed to the stone box and lowered his voice, saying, "It was once held by a Beander of the apprentice pathway. When that Beander was killed, it gained the ability to distort space." Dai Li was stunned, not expecting there to be any findings. "Can you tell me what method you used for your research?" "Yesterday, the Night Watchers used many divination methods but could not figure out the origin of 2-355. Hobert smiled. "Of course, but you must immediately issue me the auxiliary personnel identification." Dai Li smiled, half seriously, half jokingly. "It's not impossible." "All right then, I'll be waiting for your identification." Hobert smiled, stood up, and left. He found a restaurant, spent 2 Sul 7 pence on a rather delicious lunch, and then took a carriage to the police station in the western suburbs to request a portion of Henry's family's property from the police as compensation for his client. Generally, such a request would not be taken seriously by the police, and it would likely take 1 or 2 months before the compensation could be approved. However, due to the special nature of this case, and more importantly, because Daniel was the one who received Hobert. Although Daniel knew nothing about the Beander world, after the incident on the 2nd floor of Henry's house, he already understood that Hobert must belong to someone from that mysterious world. At that time, Hobert had solved the problem on the 2nd floor with just 2 shots, but when the special department personnel arrived, Hobert and the 2 others fired 20 or 30 shots in the house. More than 20 minutes later, the man with the knife scar on his face emerged from the house somewhat disheveled, which was enough to indicate that they must have resolved an even more terrifying problem. Daniel's cooperation made the matter much smoother. In just over 2 hours, Hobert obtained 20 pounds of Henry's family's property. After thanking Daniel, Hobert again took a hired carriage to Polly's house. As he entered, Hobert glanced at Henry's house. Caution tape had already been strung across the doorframe, and 2 police officers stood guard in the yard. Through conversation with Mr. Polly, Hobert learned that members of the Night Watcher squad had visited again this morning. Of course, Mr. Polly did not know about the Night Watcher squad. he only said that a carriage with the holy emblem of night had visited again. Presumably, they were there to check if there were any oversights at Henry's house. It was Henry's dog that dug through the basements of Henry's house and Airlie's house, which is why Henry's dog occasionally ran out of Airlie's house, Hobert explained. So it's Henry's family, not Airlie's family, that needs to compensate you. Holly was initially a bit strange, wondering if Airlie hadn't noticed this. As he thought this, he saw Hobert taking out £20 in cash, and his remaining doubts were completely thrown out the window. Hobert said, "This is part of Henry's family's property that I just received from the police. £10 of it is to compensate your losses, and £10 is my commission fee." He shook his head and joked, "For this £10 commission, I risked my life yesterday." Holly had originally given up hope for compensation. When he received the £10, he was happy for a while, but then he felt a pang of heartache when he saw Hobert put away the other £10. On the way back, Hobert again felt the sensation of the potion loosening. Sure enough, every time he completed a commission, his spirituality would become more active. On Saturday morning, Hobert had not yet alighted from the carriage upon arriving at the law firm when he saw Mr. Robin and his cousin waiting at the entrance of the firm. Mr. Robin finally changed into a new hat, and his spirits improved significantly, but he still looked a bit awkward on the road where carriages came and went. After Hobert got out of the carriage, Robin and his cousin David immediately came up to him. "Good morning, Hobert." "Good morning, gentlemen." Hobert smiled. "Your living conditions seem to have improved. It appears my persuasion had some effect." "Your advice made us recognize the facts," Mr. Robin said. Hobert nodded slightly. He was pleased to have helped two misguided individuals see through the deceptions of this era. He led Robin and his cousin to his desk. "What difficulties have you encountered this time?" Robin looked at David. David was much taller than Robin, with a small mustache, and looked like he had a bad temper, but in front of Hobert, David was as awkward as Robin. "It's not us, sir." He seemed to organize his words before speaking. "It's a coworker of mine. During work, the machine swallowed one of his legs and one of his hands. He hopes to receive £300 in compensation, but the factory owner is only willing to give £100. He himself sought out several lawyers, and those lawyers all said the compensation he was asking for was too high and were unwilling to take the case. You might be his last hope." Hobert recalled the laws regarding work-related injury compensation, only to find that perhaps due to his transmigration, he couldn't quite remember this part of the law. He asked, "Your coworker has lost his ability to work, right?" "Yes," David replied. "Not only that, he has now lost his family and can only beg for a living. He hopes to get £300 in compensation because he wants to buy a piece of land in the suburbs. He said he grew up on the land since he was a child, and even with one hand, he can still grow crops." Hobert nodded. In his opinion, £300 was not an excessive compensation request. However, he remembered a colleague mentioning during a casual chat that there was an unwritten rule for work-related injury cases in factories: £100 for disability and £150 for death. Although Hobert sympathized with David's coworker, he did not rush to express his stance. "I need to speak with your coworker in person." David nodded repeatedly. All right, I'll bring him over this afternoon." After seeing Robin and David off, Hobert went to the bookshelf and found the section on civil compensation. He found that there was only one regulation for work-related injury compensation. If a worker is injured during work, the employer is obligated to bear their medical expenses and provide corresponding compensation. Hobert then realized that it wasn't because he had transmigrated and forgotten the relevant laws, but rather that the relevant law was indeed only this vague single clause. There was no basis for compensation in different situations such as injury, disability, or death, and it was only obligated to bear. When encountering cases with such unclear legal provisions, the judge could only rely on his own judgment, or rule based on previous cases, or based on some customary rules. Ironically, the section before the work-related injury compensation law, which dealt with how to compensate for losses caused by workers to employers, had clear regulations. How to compensate for losses to the employer within £10. How to compensate for losses from £10 to £20. How to compensate for losses from £20 to £50, all the way up to how to compensate for losses from £800 to £1,000, were all clear and explicit. Hobert sneered. It's just short of explicitly stating it's a law, protecting the interests of capitalists and nobles. Returning to his desk, Hobert realized that David's co-worker's case would be very difficult to win, even though the client's request was legitimate, even somewhat humble. Moreover, taking on such a case would easily put him at odds with some customary rules. Then Hobert thought again, since he was now a Beander and had an upper-class background, why live as cautiously as he did in his previous life? He would take this case. Since he was reborn, of course, he wanted to experience a different life. After making up his mind, Hobert began to prepare for it. When he thought of a feasible idea, he found that it was already past 10 in the morning. Hobert went to Mr. Barton's office and reported the beginning and end of Mr. Polly's case to Mr. Barton, but he only gave a brief description of Henry's family's situation. Mr. Polly's case was officially closed. I didn't know this case would involve such great danger, Mr. Barton said. If he had known there was such great danger, he would never have given this case to Hobert. Hobert smiled. Some dangers are unavoidable. Fortunately, I handled it quite well, and after the crisis, there were some gains. Establishing stable contact with official Beyonders was his greatest gain, something that even the right to use 2 to 355 could not compare to. You should take a lawyer's qualification exam. Mr. Barton jumped to the next topic. Because of your excellent performance, I will write you a letter of recommendation and ask friends for help to make your examination process smoother. The certificate Hobert currently used was an assistant lawyer's certificate. Only after obtaining a lawyer's certificate could he handle complex criminal cases and be qualified to defend clients in official courts. After thanking Mr. Barton, Hobert returned to his seat and began his daily reflection. When handling Mr. Polly's case, he felt he hadn't made any obvious error, but some lessons needed to be remembered. When dealing with official Beyonders, he had to constantly consider whether he could gain the initiative, especially the initiative in dividing the spoils. This encounter with the official Beyonders was somewhat rushed, and he didn't have time to think too much. If there were future collaborations, they must first agree on how to divide the spoils. As for the third case Mr. Barton gave him, he still had to handle it. Although there might be some risk, as Hobert's current strength grew and his resources became more extensive, his ability to handle problems had strengthened. Therefore, Hobert was confident that he could avoid or handle the risks encountered in the case. Of course, the most crucial point was that actively handling the third case was equivalent to the use of the extraordinary characteristic aggregation law. After handling Mr. Polly's case, Hobert again felt signs of potion digestion. If he continued to actively use the rules, his potion would definitely continue to digest. Moreover, the speed of potion digestion using the extraordinary characteristic aggregation law seemed faster. Hobert felt that his lawyer potion seemed to have digested a lot. As long as he continuously uses the rules and continuously summarizes, he believes the digestion speed might be even faster. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.